Pending by the swing set, little Rui poured her heart out to Lin Feng. Her father, once a ruthless warrior, was now confined to a wheelchair and completely unresponsive. She endured constant teasing at school and often caught her mother crying in secret, desperately hoping he would wake up someday. The mood turned heavy when Shahu showed up. The boy wasted no time and immediately started picking on Rui, throwing out lies and cruel insults about her parents. Her blood boiled. Without thinking twice, she charged at the bully, but because of the difference in strength, he shoved her aside. Rui fell and slammed her head against the metal frame of the playground equipment. To make matters worse, the brat laughed and spat on her. Furious, she rushed at him again and sank her teeth into his hand. The boy's crying quickly drew his mother over, and she reacted in the worst way possible. The woman kicked Rui, dragged her across the ground, and tried to force her to kneel and apologize. Even injured, the girl refused to give in to someone who had insulted her family. What none of them knew was that Lin Feng was aware of everything. Trapped inside his own body, watching his daughter being humiliated awakened something savage within him. An overwhelming power began stirring inside the protagonist, fueled entirely by hatred and the desperate urge to protect his own blood at any cost. Things crossed the line when the bully's father decided to join in. He grabbed Rui by the hair with brutal force, trying to bend her down and force an apology out of her. When she refused to give in no matter what, the boy's mother slapped the child hard across the face and mocked her stubborn resistance. Even cornered by aggressive adults, the girl stood her ground and refused to back down. Enraged by her defiance, the man raised his hand to deliver the final blow, but the attack never reached its target. In the blink of an eye, the aggressor's wrist was crushed in midair. Lin Feng had awakened. The protagonist locked the man's arm in place and delivered a clear warning. From that moment on, anyone who laid a finger on his daughter would pay with their life. The coward's arrogance vanished instantly, replaced by absolute panic as he was slammed into the ground and completely restrained. Desperate after seeing her husband overpowered, the woman charged at Lin. She threw useless punches at his back and screamed that she was calling the police. The response was swift and merciless. A single slap from the protagonist sent her flying, rolling across the grass. With an icy stare, Lin declared that he was sparing that family's lives out of pure mercy, but the warning had been delivered. As the aggressors trembled in fear, the warrior's mind was dragged straight into the past, flooding him with flashes of a bloody war. In his memories, he was battered and covered in wounds, the last man standing in the middle of a massacre, while a mysterious voice echoed through the battlefield, praising his overwhelming power. The warning echoed across the battlefield, declaring that the hero's strength was equal to an entire army. Lin turned his head just as a new group of enemies landed to block his path. The squad's spokesman didn't waste any words. He acknowledged the warrior's reputation but declared that the legend would end right there, executed by the elite forces of their faction. Lin answered with nothing more than a mocking grin. Gripping his spear tightly, he made it clear that 6 years of constant warfare had not taught him to fear empty threats. The taunt was all it took. The squad leader gave the order, and the encirclement closed in immediately as enemies attacked from every direction, hoping to cut off any chance of escape. But the protagonist fought like a ghost. He took a glancing blow without showing the slightest sign of pain and responded with a devastating counterattack that sent one of the attackers flying. Betting on cowardly tactics, the troop commander attempted a deadly strike from behind, convinced it would end the battle. The mistake proved fatal. In a flash, Lin's spear pierced straight through the leader's chest. The enemy coughed up blood, his eyes frozen in pure shock. Without a trace of emotion, the hero declared that the man was pathetic and assured him that no army alive could force him back even a single inch. In one final act of desperation, the 3 remaining warriors launched an all-or-nothing assault. The response was an instant massacre. Lin's weapon sliced through the air with such speed that his opponents fell before they could even react. The dust finally settled, revealing the hero standing alone once again in the middle of the carnage. He had sacrificed everything on the battlefield to secure a better future for his family, but the cost had been far too high. With his body shattered and his mind exhausted, the warrior knew he could not afford to fall, because his daughter's life depended on an urgent bone marrow transplant. His daughter's trembling voice pulled him out of the trance. Rui threw herself into her father's arms, overwhelmed after finally seeing him awake. Filled with protective fury, Lin Feng turned toward the aggressors and delivered his ultimatum. Either the cowards bowed 100 times and begged for forgiveness, or he would wipe their entire bloodline from the earth. Terrified, the disgraced family obeyed immediately, smashing their foreheads against the ground in blind panic. Through tears, the little girl confessed how everyone constantly made her suffer and how nobody believed her father was a real hero. The protagonist promised that the days of humiliation were over. However, the extreme exhaustion returned to his body, which had not fully recovered yet. Noticing her father's weakness, Rui asked to be put down, and he carefully lowered her to the ground while trying to maintain a strong front. When he suggested they return home, the girl revealed another betrayal. Her own grandmother had thrown them out of the house, forcing Rui's mother to meet with a suspicious man named Sun. Lin Feng immediately sensed the trap. Thinking quickly, his daughter whispered for him to pretend to be unconscious again. The warrior smiled at the little girl's cleverness and returned to the wheelchair. Instantly, Rui began screaming, blaming her father's fake collapse on the aggressors, who were still lying on the ground. Taking full advantage of the act, the girl declared that her uncle would make them pay dearly for the assault and pushed the wheelchair toward home, leaving the cowards panicking over the possibility of a lawsuit. The welcome at the house was pure hostility. The grandmother exploded at the sight of the protagonist and demanded that her granddaughter stop calling that burden her father. Standing behind the wheelchair, the little girl stood her ground and refused to back down. The situation worsened when a smug voice echoed from inside the house. It was Sun, pressuring Shin into accepting a marriage proposal. Lin's wife appeared moments later, visibly cornered and begging for more time to think. Confident in his success, the man agreed to wait, but the smile vanished from his face the moment he stepped into the yard and found the hero and the little girl staring back at him. The intruder quickly realized that the child was Shin's daughter and tried to force a friendly image by pinching her cheeks. The greedy grandmother demanded that her daughter escort the man out, but the warrior's wife refused without hesitation. Desperate to please the visitor, the old woman hurried after him. Watching the scene unfold, Rui quietly whispered to her father that the man wanted to destroy their family. Shin approached, gently held the little girl's hands, and thanked her for looking after Lin. Through tears, Rui asked if she would be forced to have a new father, but her mother firmly promised that would never happen. While wiping the girl's face, Shin noticed the mark left by the assault. Not wanting to create more tension, Rui quickly came up with a lie. Soon afterward, the trio entered the house. After the child was sent to her room, the couple was finally left alone. Shin sat on the bed facing the hero. Lin froze, worried that she had seen through his act. Believing that her husband was still in a coma, she opened her heart. Crying as she gently stroked the warrior's hair, she praised all the sacrifices he had made in the past, but then revealed a harsh reality. The confession hit like a bitter blow. To guarantee their daughter's safety, health, and future, Shin felt she had no choice but to accept Sun's marriage proposal. Crushed by the weight of that decision, she stood up and begged forgiveness from the only man she had ever truly loved. The door closed quietly behind her. Left alone, the warrior reflected on the living hell his wife had endured during his coma. The heavy silence was broken by a sudden noise from the other side of the room. He wasn't alone after all. Yang, his younger sister-in-law, stepped out of the bathroom completely distracted. Her phone rang, and the conversation exposed the betrayal without restraint. It was Sun calling. Ignoring the protagonist's presence, Yang spoke openly with the wealthy suitor. She admitted that her sister was still rejecting his gifts, but confidently stated that the marriage was only a matter of time. Sensing an opportunity, the businessman proposed a deal and promised to pay whatever price was necessary for a little help behind the scenes. Greed took over instantly. Yang accepted the dirty arrangement and immediately demanded a designer handbag and a new pair of shoes as payment. Acting as if she owned the place, she walked straight to her sister's closet and casually borrowed a blouse, joking that her future brother-in-law would need to buy her an entirely new wardrobe after the wedding. With the agreement sealed, she slammed the door and left. Standing alone in the room, the hero's blood boiled as he realized that his wife was preparing to sacrifice herself to a stranger simply to ensure their daughter's survival. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the room, causing the curtains to flutter. In the blink of an eye, a swift figure landed directly in front of the wheelchair. It was Xiao. With the discipline of a soldier, she bowed respectfully and celebrated the long-awaited awakening of her commander. Lin immediately questioned why she had abandoned her military post. With unwavering loyalty, the warrior replied that her master's life was worth more than any border, especially since every frontier remained untouched and peaceful out of fear from the last massacre he had unleashed. The atmosphere darkened when she delivered her report. During the past 2 years, the protagonist's family had become the target of countless opportunists eager to steal his wife away. Unable to act on her own authority, the subordinate begged for permission to eliminate the scum responsible. Suppressing his anger, Lin selected his first target and demanded a complete investigation into Sun's life. With her orders received, Xiao disappeared through the window like smoke. The silence didn't last long. The door burst open, and Rui rushed into the room with a bright smile, dragging her mother behind her. Using a fairy tale as inspiration, the clever girl launched her plan. She insisted that a true love's kiss would wake her father from his coma. Embarrassed, Shin tried to brush it off, arguing that magic didn't exist in real life. But the little girl, fully aware that the hero could hear every word, stared at her mother with relentless hope until she finally gave in. Accepting her daughter's request, Shin stepped closer to her husband. It had been a long time since the warrior had felt her face so close to his. She placed a kiss filled with emotion on him, desperately hoping for a miracle. Rui peeked through her fingers, waiting for the magical moment, but the protagonist remained completely motionless. Heartbroken, Shin looked at her daughter and delivered the painful truth. The fantasy was over, and fairy tales weren't real. To make matters worse, she confessed that their only path forward might be accepting another man into their lives. The statement enraged Rui. The little girl exploded, accusing her mother of being a liar for breaking her promise of loyalty. Through tears, she clung to Lin Feng's arm and begged him to wake up and end the nightmare. Inside, the hero was torturing himself. Watching his daughter suffer shattered his heart, but he needed to maintain the deception until the right moment. Faced with her father's silence, the child's frustration turned into anger, and she called him a liar as well. Unable to endure the emotional outburst any longer, Shin carried her daughter out of the room by force, demanding that she stop yelling at the helpless man. Rui left furious and confused, unable to understand why her father would allow himself to be replaced. The exhausting day finally came to an end, and darkness swallowed the house, leaving only a single lamp glowing as the night settled into silence. Eventually, the little girl cried herself to sleep, complaining that everyone had deceived her. Shin watched in silence, crushed by guilt, when the door suddenly opened. Yang entered and immediately questioned her sister about the evening's important event. Uninterested in Shin's hesitation, the younger woman grabbed her by the arm and insisted that marrying Sun would solve all their financial problems and allow them to give Rui the best life possible. Wanting nothing more than to let her daughter rest peacefully, the hero's wife finally gave in and agreed to go. Meanwhile, back in the bedroom, Xiao reappeared through the window carrying a strategic report. The subordinate handed over a complete file detailing Sun's crimes and informed Lin that the man was hosting an extravagant birthday celebration for Jinan at Hotel Zhou, with Shin expected to arrive in less than 40 minutes. As he reviewed the documents, Lin Feng's expression hardened. The criminal methods and cruelty of that family had crossed every possible line. That was the final straw. In a stunning turn of events, the protagonist rose from his wheelchair under his own power and ordered his soldier to prepare herself, because the two of them would personally ruin the banquet. A short time later, the two sisters arrived at the hotel and were escorted by staff members into the exclusive ballroom. Yang was completely dazzled by the wealth on display, pointing excitedly at the flawless decorations and the massive event banners. The atmosphere inside the exclusive hotel was filled with tension, and Shin's nervousness was impossible to hide. The entire venue had been reserved solely for the celebration, a display of wealth that quickly caught the attention of every guest. While Jay flattered the rich host with approving laughter, the sound of a little girl's footsteps echoed through the hallway, drawing everyone's attention. What seemed like a simple birthday party suddenly became something else entirely. A small box was opened, revealing a massive diamond ring that left Yang completely mesmerized. Without hesitation, Sun dropped to one knee and proposed to Shin. As hotel staff whispered about the outrageous fortune his family had spent on the event, the man promised to support and protect everyone present. To Shin, however, the proposal felt more like a chain around her neck. Silence filled the room. Near the piano, in a corner of the hall, the scene was being closely watched by Chin and Lin. Chin was ready to step in and throw the arrogant suitor out of the building, but she was instructed to hold back and simply observe, despite the tension hanging heavily in the air. Shin's response shattered everyone's expectations. She pulled her hand away and rejected the proposal, claiming that everything was moving far too fast. She stated that her only priority was taking care of her daughter. Panic immediately spread among her relatives. Jay and Yang desperately pressured her, insisting she should not throw away the opportunity to be with such a powerful man. That was enough for the gentleman act to fall apart. Furious over being rejected and calling her response pure ingratitude after renting out an entire hotel, Sun's patience vanished. When Shin tried to walk away, he turned violent and grabbed her arm. His tone darkened as the fake declaration of love transformed into an ultimatum. Either she accepted submission, or her family would be erased and her daughter would suffer the consequences. Ignoring her refusal, the man publicly announced their marriage, drawing applause from the guests. Lin gave his approval. In less than a second, Chin intercepted the aggressor, locking his wrist before he could lay a hand on Shin. Convinced the interruption was nothing more than jealousy, the rich heir mocked her and casually touched her face. The response was immediate. One devastating punch shattered his glasses. Humiliated and enraged, he ordered his bodyguards to kill her. The attack failed miserably. With absurd ease and minimal effort, Chin knocked out 4 security guards within seconds. Staring at his men sprawled across the floor and his last remaining guard frozen in shock, the heir panicked and screamed, demanding obedience, because he supposedly owned that territory. Looking at him with pure contempt, Chin made it clear that his family's money was no excuse for his complete lack of manners. As guests whispered among themselves, trying to figure out the identity of the ruthless young woman, she casually wished Young a happy birthday, leaving her completely speechless. The tension inside the ballroom was suddenly broken by the sound of piano keys. Everyone's attention shifted toward the stage, where an incredibly handsome man commanded the instrument with a flawless melody. While Yang struggled to process what she was seeing, Chin smiled in recognition. It was Lin, her husband, her mentor. The spoiled heir completely lost his mind. Outraged that someone was performing music at an event he believed he had paid for, he began screaming for the hotel manager. Within moments, a squad of hotel security guards rushed into the ballroom. Certain that the situation had finally turned in his favor, he pointed at Chin and ordered them to attack. Then came the shocking twist. Instead of moving toward the young woman, the guards grabbed the heir himself. Kicking and shouting that he was the VIP customer, he demanded to be released immediately. With an ironic smile, the manager destroyed the playboy's illusion. There had been no mistake. The truth was that the person who had rented the entire hotel was Lin, the man sitting at the piano. The aggressor's arrogance instantly turned into panic as he was dragged out of the building, while the manager respectfully bowed and apologized to Chin for the misunderstanding. The manager acted quickly and ordered the immediate removal of the playboy and his entire group. Despite their protests and resistance, they were escorted out of the ballroom. Moments later, the final announcement echoed through the staff radios. The Sun family was permanently banned from the hotel. As the dust settled, attention returned to the stage. Chin stared at the pianist with a lump in her throat, struggling to process whether that perfect man was truly her husband. Captivated by his presence, Yang insisted on an introduction, but the protagonist maintained her disguise and claimed she had no idea who he was. As Lin's melody hypnotized the guests, a series of explosions outside suddenly changed the direction of the celebration. Everyone rushed toward the windows. The night sky erupted into a massive fireworks display that formed a personalized birthday message for the guest of honor. It was the moment everything changed. Overwhelmed by the romance of the gesture and convinced that the man at the piano was responsible for the surprise, urgency took over. She needed to face reality with her own eyes. Ignoring her sister's attempts to stop her, Chin pulled free from her grip and ran desperately toward the stage. But her anticipation ended in disappointment. By the time she reached the piano, the music had already stopped. All that remained was an empty instrument and the lingering echo of silence. Behind her, her sister informed her that Lin had already left for home. Trusting the information, she immediately decided to return as well, and his plan had worked perfectly. The protagonist had left the hotel early to ensure he would be back in his room long before his wife arrived. Inside the privacy of his quarters, Lin, now fully recovered, ordered his subordinate, Chin, to gather every piece of information available on the rival family. Chin apologized for acting so boldly during the event, but insisted that his identity must remain hidden. With an enigmatic smile, the master asked whether she was afraid of the impact it would have when everyone finally discovered that he had awakened. The conversation is cut short by Shin's imminent arrival. Chin quickly bows and withdraws to carry out her orders. To maintain the act of being a crippled man a little longer, Lin hurriedly changes back into his old clothes. Hiding the truth from his wife weighs heavily on him, but he knows he has no other choice. Shin returns home exhausted, completely ignoring her mother's questions about the party. In the living room, the matriarch loudly complains that her daughter's disabled husband is still sitting uselessly in his room without showing any improvement. That is when Yang steps in proudly and plays a recording from the event at Hotel Joe, revealing that a powerful billionaire named Lin had paid for everything exclusively for Shin. Her mother's reaction is immediate and full of mockery. She concludes that now that her daughter has found a real man with wealth and status, there is no reason to keep her current husband around. Ignoring everyone else, Shin opens the bedroom door. Overcome with desperation, she calls out to Lin, hoping for a response. But the sight of her husband sitting motionless in his wheelchair destroys the hope she had regained after believing she saw him at the hotel. Her mind drifts back 5 years earlier, when her family tried to force her into a marriage with Zun, a man she despised. Her salvation came when her grandfather introduced her to Lin. They married quickly, and soon afterward, Ray was born, becoming the only bright light in their difficult lives. However, the little girl later became seriously ill and required a bone marrow transplant. Lin became the donor, saving his daughter's life at the cost of his own health. Crying as she relives that sacrifice, Shin collapses to her knees in front of him and begs him to wake up because she can no longer endure the pain. Lin watches her with deep sadness and silently vows that her wait is almost over. Outside the room, Yang observes the scene with complete disdain, unable to understand her sister's attachment to an invalid man. Curious about the mysterious billionaire who shares the same surname, she enters the room with hidden motives. Yang tries to convince Shin to go out to a bar. Shin refuses, explaining that she needs rest so she can take Ray to school the following morning. Even so, her sister continues insisting, pretending she only wants to help her relax. In reality, everything is part of a setup. Hours earlier, Sun had demanded repayment for the favor Yang owed him. Despite her initial hesitation, Yang agreed to bring her sister to the bar that night after Sun promised he could fool the powerful and mysterious Mr. Lin with the perfect lie. Pretending to care, Yang hugs Shin and showers her with fake compliments to disguise her betrayal. Exhausted and completely unsuspecting, Shin steps away to freshen up her appearance. Before leaving the room, Yang approaches Lin's wheelchair and delivers a cruel taunt, assuring him that his divorce will happen before the night is over. The moment the room is empty, one of Lin's informants strategically appears through the window with critical news. He reveals that Shin's family is completely bankrupt and buried under debt. To avoid total financial ruin, they made a dirty deal with a rival clan, promising an alliance through marriage with their heir. Hearing the report, Lin finally loses his patience. He already understands the manipulative nature of this suitor and swears that the man is about to learn the hard way that he targeted the wrong person. The moment he sees his wife's carriage leaving the property, Lin immediately orders his man to monitor every single move they make. Meanwhile, at one of the city's most popular bars, the greedy heir is celebrating like a madman. He drinks with his employees and flaunts his arrogance, already celebrating what he believes is his inevitable victory. That is when the two sisters enter the establishment, drawing everyone's attention. The man smiles triumphantly and walks toward them. The moment Shin notices him approaching, she reacts with open hostility and demands to know what he is doing there. Yang tries to calm her nervous sister, but the damage has already been done. Shin puts the pieces together and realizes she has fallen into a trap arranged by her own sister. Trying to salvage the plan, the man bows dramatically, apologizes for his previous mistakes, and begs for a friendly conversation. As he speaks, the protagonist's wife begins evaluating the situation in her mind. Since his family's plans depended entirely on that alliance, the heir swallowed his pride and promised not to repeat his past behavior. Behind the peaceful facade, however, all he could think about was breaking Shin's will and carrying out his twisted agenda. Pretending to call a truce, he walks to the bar, pours a glass of wine, and takes advantage of a brief moment of distraction to slip a pill into her drink. He then offers the glass as an official apology. Shin immediately refuses, explaining that she is driving. That is when Yang intervenes, pressuring her sister to take at least one sip to make peace. Giving in to her family's insistence, Shin downs the drink in a single gulp, much to the man's satisfaction as he eagerly waits for the next stage of his plan. It does not take long for the substance to affect her. She begins feeling unwell and says she needs to leave. Before she can get away, the man moves aggressively. He grabs her by force and pulls her into his arms. Shin struggles to resist, but the drug is draining her strength. Around them, the people in the bar watch with complete indifference, while her own sister witnesses everything without lifting a finger to help. The news spreads quickly. Lin's informant alerts him that his wife has been taken. Consumed by rage, the protagonist demands her exact location. Within seconds, his team tracks the target to the luxurious Milky Way hotel. Lin decides to intervene personally and crush those responsible. Meanwhile, inside the hotel room where she has been taken, Shin struggles against the disorientation, unable to understand where she is and facing serious danger. Inside the room, Sun ignores Shin's pleas to return home and tries to convince her that she simply drank too much. Overflowing with arrogance, the aggressor grabs her chin and makes dark threats designed to force her into submission. Shin refuses to surrender so easily and manages to shove him away. The man responds with a cynical smile, surprised by her resistance. He begins insulting her while tightly gripping her hand, declaring that escape is impossible with so many witnesses around. Filled with disgust, the young woman fought with every bit of strength she had left and, in a desperate move, bit the villain's ear. Consumed by pain and rage, the heir reacted violently. Suddenly, the door was kicked open. Lin stepped into the room with an overwhelming presence. Failing to recognize the intruder, Sun shouted that he had entered the wrong room. But the color drained from his face the moment he met the protagonist's deadly gaze. Lin coldly promised that if he ever dared to appear before them again, his entire clan would be wiped out. Shin watched in complete shock, unable to believe that her husband was standing there on his own 2 feet. Before the aggressor could even react, Lin drove a brutal punch straight into his face, sending him crashing to the floor. Lying there dazed and disoriented, the heir struggled to understand how a man supposedly confined to a wheelchair could have done that to him. All he could do was swallow the bitter taste of defeat. With bruises on his face from the punch and the earlier bite mark, Sun staggered back to his feet. Completely detached from reality, he convinced himself that the couple had set a trap for him, a claim that only fueled the protagonist's anger. Even trembling, the heir refused to abandon his arrogance. He mocked Lin's physical condition and insisted that a man like him had no right to challenge someone of wealth and status. To make matters worse, he openly threatened the safety of Lin's wife and daughter if anyone dared touch him again. Lin rejected the provocation but declared that this would be the final warning. Ignoring the danger, Sun pulled out his phone to summon his men, swearing he would prove who truly held power. Lin immediately responded. He calmly asked whether that was the same hand that had touched his wife. Without waiting for an answer, he seized the arm and twisted it violently. Sun screamed in agony and shouted that his family would destroy Lin for what he had done, but the response came in the form of another crushing punch. The heir collapsed to his knees, completely dominated. Lin made it clear that his family's wealth meant absolutely nothing to him and delivered a final ultimatum. If there was ever a next time, there would be no mercy. At that moment, the drug's effects began taking their toll on Shin. She could barely keep her eyes open. Her husband quickly moved to her side, removed his jacket, draped it over her shoulders, and assured her that she was safe. Still shaken by fear and the lingering effects of the drug, Shin worried that her husband would end up in prison for killing someone. The moment Sun heard her concern, his confidence returned. Believing he had regained the advantage, he began mocking the situation. His arrogance lasted only seconds. Lin walked toward him with icy calm, informed him that he no longer viewed him as a human being, and hurled him brutally back onto the floor, leaving him no chance to resist. The heir crawled across the ground, begging for mercy. Lin informed him that he still had a use, and that his life would be spared for now. As soon as Lin lifted his foot, the trembling man nervously asked what he intended to do. The hero stared at the coward who had forced his wife into that room and decided to settle the score. Ignoring every plea for mercy, he struck the most vulnerable part of his rival's body, causing the man to unleash a blood-curdling scream of agony. Satisfied with the punishment, Lin left the scoundrel writhing on the floor and lifted his wife into his arms. Shin slowly regained consciousness and became emotional when she realized she had been rescued, although part of her feared it was only a dream. Her husband assured her that everything was real, apologized for arriving late, and kissed her. Moments later, he called his most trusted subordinate and ordered a doctor to be prepared at home to examine her, bringing a satisfied smile to his ally's face. 2 years after the accident that made the world underestimate him, the protagonist officially set his revenge in motion, and the Sun clan had become the first target. Later that night, Lin entered his daughter's room and found her sleeping peacefully. The moment she sensed her father nearby, the little girl woke up and threw herself into his arms, crying as she confessed how terrified she had been of losing him forever. He reassured her about his health, told her to get some rest, and promised that her mother would be home soon. When he tried to leave, the child grabbed his hand, afraid she had been fooled again and that he would disappear into the night. Seeing the doubt in her eyes, the hero revealed that the plan had changed and demanded absolute secrecy regarding his recovery. The little girl promised not to tell anyone, not even her mother. Just like that, the two formed a secret alliance. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the medical team reviewed Sun's test results and delivered a devastating verdict. The condition required emergency surgery. Even worse, the risk of death was extremely high. The situation deteriorated further when the doctor explained that amputation was the only available option. Completely out of control, the heir screamed in pure hatred loud enough for the entire hospital to hear, swearing vengeance against Lin. Back at home, Shin eventually woke up feeling weak and disoriented. Beside her, little Rue smiled and teased her for sleeping so long. The memories of the previous night's nightmare hit Shin like a punch. She immediately searched for her husband, only to find him sitting motionless in the wheelchair. Tears filled her eyes. She convinced herself that her rescue had been nothing more than a dream, and that some unknown stranger had saved her. Rue gently held her mother's face and promised that her father would always protect them. The peaceful moment did not last long. Shin's mother stormed into the room, demanding to know who had drugged her daughter. Shin revealed the attack at the bar and explained that she had been rescued at the last possible moment. The moment the matriarch realized the accusations were aimed at the powerful son, her attitude changed immediately. Yang quickly stepped in to defend both the villain and herself, since she had been the one who brought her sister there in the first place. She insisted everything had been a misunderstanding and tried to bury the crime to protect her marriage plans. Their mother supported the lie and claimed that Shin was mistaken. Furious at their hypocrisy, Rue shouted at her grandmother in defense of her mother. The elderly woman immediately responded with authority and ordered the child to be quiet. Nearby, Lin burned with rage, forced to remain silent for the time being. Then, without warning, the matriarch's phone began to ring. A wave of tension swept through the room as everyone realized who was calling. It was Sun. The matriarch answered and received a terrifying ultimatum. Either they came to the aggressor's estate immediately, or the entire family would be eliminated. Panicked, the mother demanded that Shin swallow her pride and apologize if she wanted to save everyone. Seeing no other option, Shin reluctantly agreed. The decision left little Rue furious, unable to accept the injustice of watching her mother humiliate herself before a criminal. Alone with her father, the little girl begs him to change the situation. Lin asks his daughter to guide him outside, promising that he will personally crush their enemies once and for all, put an end to their arrogance, and protect the family from their grandmother's constant scolding. He emphasizes that everything must remain an absolute secret, and the girl eagerly agrees to the plan. On the other side of the city, the head of the rival clan examines the heir's miserable condition. The playboy's mother breaks down in tears, but her husband cuts her off, complaining that her overprotectiveness turned their son into a weakling who jeopardizes business over a woman. The young man insists that he was the victim of a carefully planned ambush, a theory his mother passionately supports, but the patriarch dismisses the strength of their rivals. Even so, suspicious that someone powerful might be backing them, he swears to tear apart whoever dared lay a hand on his son. That is when the heir blurts out that the culprit was the wheelchair-bound husband. The conversation comes to an abrupt halt as the atmosphere suddenly turns ice cold. Lin enters the mansion alone, radiating a suffocating and murderous aura that leaves the guards frozen in place. With complete sarcasm, the hero questions why so much security is necessary in the house. Startled, the woman retreats behind her husband, who demands to know the intruder's identity. At that exact moment, the injured hare leaps out of bed, points at him, and screams that this is the man who ruined him. The patriarch is furious at the audacity of the intrusion and accuses the stranger of pure insolence. Lin simply sweeps the room with a look of complete contempt, making it clear that nobody present is worthy of receiving an apology from his wife. With a firm gesture, the clan leader orders his men to restrain him immediately. Wearing an amused smile, the protagonist informs him that the guards outside can barely remain standing, but generously allows him to call for more reinforcements if he thinks it will help. Blinded by rage, the leader makes empty threats and pretends to offer one final chance to surrender. Tired of the cheap arrogance, Lin asks whether he truly believes his own words. In the blink of an eye, the hero closes the distance and appears directly behind his opponent. Before the man can even react, Lin delivers a crushing blow to his face, sending him crashing to the floor and proving exactly who makes the rules. Watching her husband collapse, the woman falls into complete panic. She tries to scream, but immediately backs away and covers her own mouth after meeting the protagonist's eyes. The injured patriarch struggles to his feet, shouting that he will destroy anyone who supports Lin. The hero steps in front of him and calmly concludes that the father is every bit as pathetic as the son. In the corner, the heir watches the massacre, completely paralyzed by fear, convinced that his rival is not even human. Lin's overwhelming presence causes everyone in the room to tremble in terror. Without the slightest effort, the hero lifts the patriarch by the throat. Desperate, the woman throws herself at the protagonist's feet and offers any amount of money to spare her husband. Realizing that the company will collapse without its leader, the son also breaks down, begging for mercy and swearing never to bother Shin again. Lin finds every attempt at peaceful negotiation ridiculous and throws the patriarch back onto the floor without the slightest remorse. The old man lies there struggling to breathe under his wife's desperate gaze, while the hero establishes the new rules. The ultimatum is crystal clear. They have exactly 24 hours to formally apologize to Shin's family. If they fail, their entire clan will be wiped out. To finish, Lin delivers one final terrifying warning. If anyone reveals that he has recovered, execution will follow immediately. Fear consumes the injured patriarch long before the door even closes behind the hero. Left alone with his family, the patriarch swallows the humiliation and decides to strike back. Consumed by hatred, he rises to his feet determined to hire thugs to eliminate Shin's relatives as quickly as possible. While his wife watches the hallway, he begins issuing orders over the phone. But the game changes before he can even get started. The report on the other end of the line is devastating. Every investor has terminated their contracts. The banks have frozen the company's credit lines. The phone slips from the old man's hand as he falls into complete shock, watching an empire worth hundreds of millions crumble in a matter of hours. In the corner of the room, the heir tries to suggest a solution, but his father ignores him, paralyzed by the realization of Lin's destructive influence. Faced with the collapse of everything he built, the patriarch snaps. He grabs his own son violently, shakes him, and orders him to take money and beg for Shin's forgiveness. The warning is brutal. If she refuses the apology, his own father will personally finish him off. Meanwhile, completely unaware of the rival family's collapse, Shin's mother rushes out of the house, demanding that her daughter immediately give in and accept every condition imposed by the enemy clan to prevent the family's destruction. Too exhausted to argue, Shin simply gives in and follows her outside. The matriarch even tries forcing her to keep a pleasant expression, but the young woman can barely hide her exhaustion. The major twist comes the moment they open the front door. The arrogant heir is there, completely humiliated, kneeling on the sidewalk. Assuming the rival clan has come for revenge, Shin's mother immediately tries to push her own daughter to her knees as well, placing all the blame on her in an attempt to save the family. To her surprise, the aggressor immediately rejects the gesture. In complete desperation, the man starts shouting that everything that happened the previous night was entirely his fault, desperately begging for the young woman's forgiveness. Shin instantly suspects another trap, but the terrified heir clings to her and swears that he will never bother her again. Exhausted and irritated, the protagonist's wife sets a single condition. The forgiveness only counts if he disappears from her life forever. The young man cries with relief and accepts the deal immediately, leaving Shin stunned by the dramatic change in his behavior. To seal the agreement, he hands over a compensation check worth $1 million. Without missing a beat, the greedy mother-in-law snatches the check from his hands, while Shin orders the scoundrel to get out of her sight once and for all. As soon as the coward runs off, the mother tries to interrogate her daughter to find out who the powerful ally was that managed to bend such an influential family to their will. Shin still has no answers, leading the elderly woman to conclude that the only possible culprit is the mysterious savior from the previous night. Outside, thinking he had gotten himself off the hook, the heir suddenly comes face to face with Lin and his little daughter in the middle of the road. The protagonist's deadly glare freezes the young man in place. Trembling, he explains that Shin accepted the apology and asks if there are any further orders. Lin simply declares that he never wants to see his face again. But before the villain can take a single step, the hero's voice stops him cold with a terrifying ultimatum. If a single word about his recovery leaks out, his entire clan will be wiped out. Overcome with panic, the young man drops to his knees once more, shouting that he will keep the secret. Meanwhile, completely unaware of what is happening outside, Shin's mother continues poisoning the atmosphere inside the house, manipulating her daughter and insisting that she should immediately divorce her crippled husband and find a man who is actually worth her time. The matriarch's lecture is interrupted when little Rei enters the room, bringing her father back from a walk outside. Relieved, Shin rushes over to hug her daughter and shower her with praise, completely ignoring the elderly woman's obvious disdain. In a conspiratorial whisper, the little girl tells her mother that her father taught some bad guys a lesson, but emphasizes that it is their special secret. Shin chuckles at what she assumes is her daughter's imagination and focuses on getting her ready for school. Watching the interaction between the two, Lin feels genuine happiness knowing that he can protect them. As soon as mother and daughter leave, the protagonist contacts his ally and demands to head out immediately so he can secretly escort them from a distance. On the way, Rei mentions that she would love for her father to pick her up after school, and Shin promises her a reward if she behaves. The lighthearted mood comes to an abrupt end the moment they reach the school gate, where the arrogant Xiao family blocks their path in an intimidating display. Shin pulls her daughter close and demands an explanation. The group's leader points to a wound on his forehead, blames Lin for the attack, and warns that this time there will be no escape. The man's wife demands 200,000 in compensation for emotional damages, falsely claiming that their son has been traumatized and refuses to eat. Shin immediately fires back, pointing out that such a thing is impossible since her husband is confined to a wheelchair. The man steps forward with brutal threats, but Rei confronts the aggressor, shouting that she is going to call her father. At that exact moment, the man is struck by Lin's familiar overwhelming aura as the protagonist watches everything from inside a car. Instantly terrified of getting beaten again, the leader turns around and runs away, dragging his relatives with him. His wife protests, unable to understand why they are fleeing from a crippled man, while the protagonist watches their cowardly retreat and thinks to himself. The protagonist decides that the final reckoning with that group can wait until the future. At the school gate, Shin says goodbye to her daughter, only to be immediately intercepted by Principal Yang, who demands a confidential meeting in his office. Assuming it is just a routine matter concerning Rei, she follows him. The moment they enter the office, the administrator drops a bombshell. Rei's enrollment contract will be terminated early. Shin reacts with outrage, since the agreement guaranteed 2 years of attendance and only 6 months have passed. Offering cynical excuses about limited openings, Yang dismisses the 50,000 she already paid, describing it as nothing more than an enrollment fee. With a smug smile, the man begins laying out his outrageous conditions. The first option is a $1 million bribe along with hefty commissions, fully aware that she cannot afford such an amount. When she asks about the second option, the principal kicks his feet up onto the desk, mocks her husband's disability, and demands illegal financial benefits along with her family's complete submission in exchange for keeping Rei enrolled. Furious, Shin slams her fist onto the desk and confronts him over his complete lack of morals. The principal remains unfazed and declares that without the corrupt arrangement, Rei will lose the entire school year. Shin decides to cut ties and find another school, but Yang issues one final threat. He claims he has enough influence to block Rei's enrollment at every school in the city and insists that Shin will come crawling back on her knees the next day. Outside, Lin's ally changes the direction of the wheelchair after spotting Shin running through the gates in tears. The hero immediately realizes that the meeting with the principal was a disaster and decides to intervene personally. Inside the office, the powerful leader of the rival clan confronts Principal Yang, eager to protect his interests with one of the wealthiest men in the region. The administrator goes out of his way to be accommodating. The visitors get straight to the point and demand Rei's immediate expulsion. The principal suggests removing the girl at the end of the semester, but the wealthy family is not satisfied. To speed things up, the clan leader offers a 1 million coin bribe. Yang's eyes light up at the easy money, and he accepts the scheme on the spot. Their celebration is cut short when the door is violently kicked open. Lin storms into the room with overwhelming force. Unaware of who he is dealing with, the principal tries to assert his authority, but the villainous couple turns pale with fear the moment they recognize the intruder. Wasting no time on conversation, Lin delivers a brutal slap to the wealthy man. The principal nervously attempts to intervene and throw the hero out, but freezes in terror when Lin promises to rip out his tongue if he dares say another word. Turning his attention back to the rival leader, Lin pins the man's hands to the floor and delivers an ultimatum. Anyone who dares lay a hand on his wife will say goodbye to their own limbs. A single murderous glance toward the aggressor's wife is enough to make her collapse to her knees, admitting her mistake and begging for mercy. Faced with her complete humiliation, the protagonist agrees to let her go. Lin then delivers the final sentence. The rival clan will only leave the building alive if they pack their bags and disappear from the city before the day is over. With no other choice and still in shock over the hero's influence, the group accepts exile and retreats. Alone with the principal, the protagonist settles onto the sofa and demands an explanation for the attack against his daughter. Only then does the bureaucrat finally realize who he is facing. understanding that he is sitting across from Rei's father. Even cornered, the principal is unbelievably bold and tries to stand up to Lin, hurling a disgustingly low insult at Shin's honor to justify what happened to Rei. The remark makes the protagonist's blood boil. He springs to his feet in an instant and delivers a devastating kick to the scumbag, shattering his glasses and sending him crashing to the floor. Lying there trembling, the man grabs his phone and promises violent retaliation, but the door is suddenly kicked open by the school's true owner. The owner storms in, furious, revealing that he has already uncovered the entire corruption and extortion scheme aimed at the hero's family. To save the school from scandal, he fires the principal on the spot and orders him to disappear immediately. Completely disoriented, the con artist cannot understand how the man he looked down on so much managed to destroy his life in a matter of minutes. Under the threat of even harsher consequences from his former boss, the ex-principal is forced to swallow his pride and beg Lin for forgiveness. The hero leans forward and warns him that his days of arrogance are over. Without wealth and without a home, all that awaits him now is misery. The school owner supports the punishment and guarantees Rei a place in the academy with VIP treatment, sealing the protagonist's complete victory. A timely phone call from the mayor saves the man's skin at the very last second. Lin decides to back off, but demands absolute silence regarding his recovery. Everyone swears to keep their mouths shut, but warning bells begin to ring. The secret of the hero's awakening is about to leak out. Meanwhile, Shin wanders through the park feeling crushed beneath the weight of the world. That is when her younger sister suddenly appears and asks whether she is heading to the company. Shin vents about the outrageous 1 million coin demand made by Rei's school. Ever opportunistic, the younger sister blames the family's lack of status and once again brings up Zun's name. Shin immediately explodes in anger, shuts down the conversation, and declares that she wants nothing more to do with that clan. Refusing to give up, her sister mentions the rumor about a wealthy boyfriend and suggests asking him for help, but Shin tells her to stop talking nonsense. Behind her friendly facade, the snake secretly mocks her sister for clinging to a passive man instead of finding someone powerful. The conversation turns sour and the younger sister leaves, abandoning Shin to her worries. Not long afterward, she meets Sun at a cafe. The air is visibly tense and unstable, which irritates the young woman, who fears her plans are falling apart. She pressures him to take action if he still wants to win Shin over, but the man responds with a bitter smile, remarking that her greed will eventually dig his grave. The girl insists that he remains the best option compared to his rivals. Tired of his weakness, she turns around and leaves. Watching her walk away, Sun picks up his phone and contacts his associates with a clear order. The perfect job is waiting for them. As she walks down the street, the younger sister grinds her teeth in frustration after realizing that the heir gave up so easily, meaning her generous commission has gone up in smoke. Distracted by the loss, she fails to notice 2 suspicious men quietly following behind her. The thugs lock their eyes on the girl, mentally celebrating the mission they have been hired to carry out. The 2 criminals surround Yang with mocking laughter, blocking her path on a deserted street. Panic washes over her as she realizes she has become their target. Watching from a distance, Chin asks her master whether she should intervene, but Lin decides to hold off for a moment so the young woman can learn a lesson. He knows about her greed, but because she is his wife's sister, he wants to see just how far her arrogance will go before stepping in. The criminals drag her by force into a dark alley. Desperate, she tries to bribe them by offering any amount of money, but the men refuse, revealing that Sun has already paid for the job. Hearing the name of her ally, Yang is left in complete shock, unable to understand why the very person she helped would betray her. She struggles and screams for help as the attack continues, but the thugs merely enjoy her vulnerability. At the last possible moment, Chin makes her move. With precise martial arts techniques, the warrior neutralizes the first attacker and knocks out his partner moments later, ending the fight within seconds. Shaking on the ground, Yang hears a direct message from her rescuer. There is no need for thanks, but she is given a clear warning to never sabotage her older sister's life again, or there will not be another rescue. The fighter leaves, abandoning the young woman to cry alone while wondering who the mysterious master behind the order could be. Overwhelmed by fear and a harsh dose of reality, Yang finally feels guilty for trying to push her sister into the arms of a scoundrel. Returning to her post, Chin reports back to the protagonist, confident that the message was delivered and the lesson properly learned. Chin informs Lin about the upcoming grand event in Benhai, but the protagonist dismisses the idea immediately. Meanwhile, on the enemy's side, one of Sun's subordinates reports that the 2 thugs sent to the alley were defeated. The heir is stunned by the mission's failure but refuses to retreat. In his eyes, the attack on Yang was only the first step. Determined to strike back, he begins planning a new strategy and summons his ally Lu to assist with the scheme. Time passes, and as the Bunhai celebration draws near, Sun reappears at Shin's family home. He adopts a humble attitude and assures everyone that he has come in peace, easily convincing the mother-in-law. He brings up the prestigious event scheduled to take place in 2 weeks, immediately exciting the matriarch. She demands that he take them to the celebration, but Sun explains that even his own clan was left off the guest list. As bait, he promises to secure invitations through an influential friend. Shin quickly loses patience, rejects the offer, and stands up to leave. However, her mother firmly grabs her and insists that she should not throw away such an important opportunity. Sun watches the pressure campaign with confidence, certain that he will be able to take both sisters if the protagonist gives in. The situation changes the moment little Rue enters the room alongside Lin. The instant Sun sees the protagonist, his stomach twists with pure anxiety. Trying to hide his panic, the villain politely bows and asks for a quick answer, assigning Yang the task of closing the deal. Still traumatized by the recent attack, Yang hesitates to trust Sun. Later, she shares her suspicions with her mother, but the elderly woman angrily dismisses them, convinced that the wealthy young heir would never stoop so low. Yang chooses not to argue, but the fear of walking into another ambush continues to haunt her. The patriarch's order had come by phone the night before, demanding Shin's immediate presence at the luxurious Yang family estate. Her mother, Lian, hated the summons and could not understand the old man's sudden interest in her daughter. Despite her suspicions, Shin sensed the urgency and left without delay. The main mansion overflowed with luxury, but the atmosphere around the dinner table was filled with frustration. At the head of the table, the grandfather fumed with anger because the family had been completely overlooked for invitations to the biggest elite gathering of the year. Despite their profitable businesses, they still lacked influence. That was when everyone's attention shifted toward Shin. The blonde member of the family suggested that she was the missing piece needed to attract the attention of the powerful. Caught off guard, she barely had time to react before her grandfather threw all the financial support he had given her over the years back in her face. The bill had finally come due, and the old man demanded a favor in return. Shin initially thought it was a terrible joke, but the blonde man's contempt and her cousin's taunts revealed how serious the trap really was. The patriarch got straight to the point. An influential tycoon was interested in her, and accepting his attention would secure the family's invitation to the event. Panic immediately gripped Shin. She tried to argue that she already had a child and would not attract anyone's interest. The response was pure cynicism. Her cousin smirked mockingly, her uncle piled on, and before long the insults were aimed at Shin's husband, who was ridiculed and referred to as a vegetable by everyone present. That was the final straw. Shin jumped to her feet, demanded respect, and made it clear that she was a married woman, not a bargaining chip. Her grandfather slammed his fist against the table, insisting that the family would be forever grateful if she cooperated. But Shin refused to bend. She stood her ground, declaring that she would never sacrifice her honor for someone else's ambitions, and that if they wanted those invitations so badly, they could crawl for them themselves. Her refusal sparked immediate outrage, and her cousin aggressively pressured her, warning her about the terrible consequences of her rebellion. Shin maintained her composure, but her cousin's jealousy finally crossed the line. Enraged by Shin's beauty, the woman shoved her into the table and violently knocked her to the floor. Amid terrifying threats against the lives of Shin's husband and daughter, an ultimatum was delivered. To protect the people she loved, the protagonist swallowed her pride and accepted the arrangement. The grandfather promised her family's safety as part of the deal and handed over the invitation. Frustrated and defeated, Shin took the pass and left. At the park, sitting on a swing beside her husband, Shin finally broke down. She confessed to Lin that an influential man was demanding her presence and that giving in was the only way to save them from complete ruin. Throwing her arms around him in desperation, she apologized and chose sacrifice over losing her family. The confession ignited Lin's hidden fury. Intense blue flames instantly erupted from his hands. He gently put his wife to sleep to spare her further stress and swore to hunt down every person responsible for humiliating her. Moments later, a powerful subordinate appeared out of nowhere and bowed in complete submission. Tired of hiding his true identity, Lin ordered that his presence be announced to everyone at the grand Bainai celebration. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Shin's mother watched the commotion without understanding what was happening. Her cousin introduced a young heir named Lu Xiao to the family in order to seal the new alliance, and the impatient grandfather demanded that Shin be called back immediately. The urgency was extreme because no one wanted to offend such a powerful man. While explaining that Shin had left to take Rei to school, the true purpose of the gathering finally came to light. Her cousin openly admitted that Lu Xiao had his sights set on Shin, and that as long as she did not cause problems, everyone's financial future would be secured. The plan immediately delighted the family, with her cousin praising the grandfather's brilliant move. Shortly afterward, the sisters entered the room, and the young heir looked them up and down with pure arrogance. The atmosphere grew tense when the patriarch broke his promise of discretion and announced that Lu Xiao would be Shin's escort. Immediately, her mother pressured her not to ruin such a golden opportunity. The grandfather seethed with anger over his granddaughter's silence, but the wealthy heir brushed it off, pretending it was merely shyness. He tried to show off the power of his companies, but Shin turned her back on him with complete disdain. Her reaction sent the family into panic. Her cousin grabbed her roughly and demanded that she apologize immediately. While Shin sat alone on the couch covering her face, the family threatened her with the loss of their event invitations. Her cousin tried to flatter the young heir, promising that the grandfather would work everything out. That was when Lu Xiao revealed his true intentions with a sinister smile, demanding that both sisters accompany him. Without the slightest hesitation from their relatives, their fate was sealed. The old man simply lit a cigarette and gave his approval for the playboy to take them both. The grandfather barked at Jin when she resisted, assuring her that Shin would take care of everything. Without giving her any choice, Lu grabbed the frightened young woman and treated the presence of both sisters as nothing more than a reward he deserved because of his status. Shin tried to pull away, but the manipulative heir once again used the safety of her husband and daughter to force her compliance. He openly enjoyed watching her submit, while she was forced to abandon her principles. Hidden near the staircase, the protagonist monitored every move. Without hesitation, he contacted Qing and issued a clear order: revoke every invitation belonging to the family and guarantee exclusive access for Shin. As they were leaving the residence, Lu's advance with the sisters was abruptly interrupted by Qing. Confused and arrogant, the heir assumed the woman was simply jealous and trying to secure a place at the celebration for herself. His amusement vanished when Qing coldly announced that his invitation had been revoked. The playboy stared in disbelief before scoffing at the claim, insisting that a billionaire family like his could never be barred from the event and that the woman was nothing more than a cheap actress. The tension exploded when Lu demanded that Shin get on her knees and beg for forgiveness if she wanted her sister released. Without a moment of hesitation, Shin slapped the playboy across the face with enough force to send him crashing to the ground. Foaming with rage, Lu vowed to ruin everyone involved, but Qing immediately fired back, threatening to tear out his tongue. The grandfather rushed into the courtyard in complete panic, realizing that the confrontation could instantly destroy the family's businesses. The old man took out his frustration on Shin, leaving her completely bewildered by the accusations. Before he could continue his verbal assault, Qing cut through the arrogance and reminded everyone that the family had been expelled from the event. To make matters even worse, she dropped the real bombshell. Out of everyone present, only Shin had unrestricted access to the Grand Benhai celebration by the direct order of a man known as Master Lin. The revelation froze the entire room. The patriarch was left utterly confused about the identity of this mysterious powerhouse. As Qing respectfully bowed toward Shin and promised that her invitation would soon arrive, the old man scoffed, claiming that elite passes were not handed out to random people. That was when an imposing man walked through the gate carrying the invitation in his hands. Lu dragged himself off the ground and celebrated when he recognized him. It was Wang, the general director of the event. Certain he was about to regain his status, the playboy proudly flaunted his family name, only to receive a brutal reality check. Wang completely ignored the fallen heir and coldly informed him that the Lu family had been removed from the guest list. Without wasting another second, Wang ordered the guards to throw the playboy out and then approached Shin with a polite smile. Under the stunned gaze of her relatives, he bowed and personally handed her the highest-level credential sent by Mr. Lin. Still shaken, Shin asked whether this was the same Lin who had previously arranged her hotel accommodations. The organizer's nod confirmed that her husband's influence was far beyond anything anyone in the room had imagined. By now, Lin's extravagant gifts were nothing new. With dollar signs in her eyes, Jan quickly concluded that the mysterious tycoon could solve all of the family's financial problems and immediately begged for an introduction. From the upstairs window, the protagonist watched the hypocrisy unfold and thought about how short his sister-in-law's memory truly was. Having no time for opportunists, Wang shut down her hopes immediately, citing his busy schedule. A firm warning from Qing left Jan swallowing nervously, and all she could do was mutter that her sister would never leave her current husband. With his task completed, the organizer departed. The family's greed escalated almost instantly. The grandfather demanded to know the wealthy benefactor's identity, while the jealous cousin snatched the invitation from Shin's hands, mocking her and questioning what methods she had used to attract such a powerful man. Shin refused to surrender her place because she strongly suspected that the mysterious master was actually her own husband and needed confirmation. That was enough to push the patriarch over the edge. The old man ranted that she cared more about a husband he considered a burden and her daughter than her own blood relatives, ordering her to abandon her family and support the clan instead, to prevent her relatives from suffering. Because of her defiance, Shin reluctantly gave in and handed over the invitation, prompting her cousin to celebrate the humiliation. Watching from afar, Lin's subordinate requested permission to teach the parasites a harsh lesson, but the protagonist stopped him, promising that the eventual reckoning would be far more devastating. Suddenly, his phone rang with urgent news. The school administration reported that little Rue had collapsed and been rushed to the hospital. Instinct took over immediately. Lin ordered the car prepared at once, and within minutes they stormed into Benhai Central Hospital, where a doctor was reviewing the unconscious girl's test results. Lin and his subordinate rushed into the hospital room. Deeply concerned, the protagonist demanded immediate answers about his daughter's condition. The diagnosis hit him like a hammer. The girl was suffering from an aggressive relapse of a previous illness. Faced with the danger, Lin immediately considered another bone marrow transplant to save her, but the specialist restrained his impulse and warned that the absolute priority was consulting the legendary Dr. Li. The revelation that the famous physician was already at the hospital caught Lin completely off guard. The doctor explained that Li had returned to the city the moment rumors about the Master's awakening began spreading. Without hesitation, Lin ordered his subordinate to bring the veteran physician immediately. During the tense wait, the doctor questioned the warrior about how little he actually knew regarding the severity of his daughter's condition, leaving Lin stunned by his own ignorance. The specialist then revealed the truth. 2 years earlier, the child had awakened both the imperial bloodline and the royal bloodline simultaneously, creating a violent clash of power that had thrown her into a coma. Before panic could completely overwhelm him, Dr. Li entered the room and reassured everyone that he would give his life to protect the little princess. The reunion with his master was so emotional that the elderly physician burst into tears, creating a brief and awkward silence among everyone present. Once he regained his composure, Lin demanded an explanation. The fusion of those two bloodlines was considered impossible and fatal. That was when the veteran doctor delivered the biggest shock yet. At that moment, only 3 people on the entire planet were known to have survived carrying both bloodlines. The hero already knew of himself and a young man from the capital, but he had never learned the identity of the third person. The answer arrived like a punch to the gut when a powerful wave of mystical energy filled the room, confirming beyond doubt that Lin's own daughter was the third bearer of that overwhelming power. Lin's fury erupted in a roar so intense that Qing instinctively retreated behind the experienced physician for protection. Frightened, she begged her master to calm down and explain his intentions before taking any drastic action. Dr. Li quickly intervened, pointing out that Lin's royal bloodline had been banished long ago and should never have affected the child. The veteran asked whether the god of war wanted to know why it happened, but Lin cut him off. He already knew the source of his daughter's imperial bloodline. Trusting the physician, the hero ordered his subordinate to release him. Li promised absolute discretion. Under his care, the secret of the girl's imperial bloodline would remain protected from everyone. Satisfied for the moment, Lin realized he needed to disappear before his wife arrived, since the school would undoubtedly notify her. He instructed Dr. Li on exactly what story to tell Shin and quietly left the hospital. Seconds later, Shin rushed through the hospital corridors in a state of pure panic, completely unaware that Sun and Lu were watching the area from a distance. Sun was immediately scolded by his companion for paying too much attention to her, but he quickly explained his reasoning. He knew his rival would need a fortune to cover the medical treatment, given her family's financial situation. Lu saw the perfect opportunity to use money as leverage and force her to beg for help. Unaware of the trap being set around her, the distressed mother burst into the room demanding answers, only to be immediately told to keep her voice down and avoid waking the young patient. When she noticed a second specialist inside the room, Shin became confused. Dr. Chen quickly introduced his mentor, a assuring her that the child was in excellent hands. After a brief acupuncture procedure, little Rue began to move and opened her eyes almost immediately. Her first reaction was to desperately search for her father, convinced that she had heard his voice before waking up. Shin comforted her daughter, explaining what had happened at school and how fortunate they were to receive help from a renowned master of traditional medicine. The little girl immediately recognized the elderly physician's reputation. Touched by her admiration, the old doctor melted emotionally and wrapped her in a warm embrace. Meanwhile, financial panic struck Shin hard. She knew her family would not contribute a single cent toward the treatment. Sensing her distress, the veteran physician assured her that there would be no charge because he had come under the orders of Mr. Lin. That revelation convinced Rue that she had not imagined her father's presence after all. Exhausted by the mystery, Shin demanded to know who this man was and why he always appeared to save her. Maintaining strict secrecy, the doctor revealed only that Lin was the absolute ruler of the southern frontier and that the truth would be revealed when the time was right. Before leaving, he handed her an emergency contact card. Back in the room, Rue insisted that her father had sent the specialist. Connecting the dots and growing tired of endless coincidences, Shin finally began considering the impossible. Lord Lin and her husband might actually be the same person. The biggest mystery in Shin's mind was why her husband would hide his true identity. Rue quickly noticed her mother's distant expression, and Shin tried to hide her worries by suggesting they return home. However, the attending physician intervened and explained that the hospitalization would need to continue for several more days for observation. Shin hesitated to leave her daughter behind, but the child's optimism eased her concerns. Rue promised she would be fine on her own and remained at the hospital. Elsewhere in the hospital, Lin was questioning his informant about Shin's relatives. The report revealed one unusual detail. While the rest of the clan appeared completely ordinary, Shin's late father remained a mystery. The hero remembered meeting his father-in-law only once before the man's sudden death, and rumors suggested that he was not even the legitimate heir of his bloodline. Dr. Lee added an important clue. Their investigation suggested that the ancient emperor's descendants possessed light-colored hair, raising strong suspicions that Shin's father had secretly carried an imperial bloodline. Fascinated by the little girl's potential, the experienced doctor asked permission to take her as his apprentice. Lin approved the request, wanting his daughter to learn how to control her abilities. In return, the elderly physician requested only a pass to the Binhai celebration, eager to witness his master's triumphant return. Meanwhile, in the medical wing, Shin finished saying goodbye to her daughter, reminding her to follow Dr. Lee's instructions and promising to return as soon as her work shift ended. Shin's phone suddenly rang. Jan was on the other end, summoning her in an authoritative tone. The protagonist could not understand what more her cousin wanted, considering the family had already stolen her elite invitation. Half an hour later, she stepped into the office and found complete chaos in the finance department. Jan was terrorizing employees throughout the room while waving a coffee cup in her hand. The moment she spotted Shin, the tyrant unloaded all her frustration onto her, accusing the manager of negligence during the company's internal crisis. In a fit of rage, Jan threw the hot coffee directly at her. Shin dodged on pure instinct. Even after firmly reminding everyone that she was officially on a scheduled day off, the woman refused to listen and imposed a severe punishment. She cut half of Shin's monthly salary and promised termination after the next mistake. Jan successfully shielded herself from responsibility and dumped the entire financial disaster onto Shin's shoulders, demanding a miraculous turnaround within only 3 days. Her cousin radiated arrogance, convinced she had finally engineered her rival's downfall. Meanwhile, in another office, Sun and Lu were nearly bursting with anticipation. Growing impatient, the playboy was reminded by Sun that Jan's trap against Shin was foolproof. Lu was already savoring the thought of cornering and exploiting the vulnerable young woman. Sun wore a victorious smile, fully convinced their scheme would succeed, although his partner still felt nervous knowing they had risked everything by altering their original plan. Sun assured him that he had an escape route prepared if their primary trap failed. After reminding Jan to remain discreet despite her obvious anxiety, both men silently acknowledged the reality they hated to admit. She was hopelessly inferior to Shin in every way. Curious, Lu demanded details about the backup plan. Sun got straight to the point. Shin's greatest weakness revolved around 2 people, her young daughter and her husband, Lin. Far away in the hospital room, the hero was asking his daughter whether she wanted to accept Dr. Lee as her master. The child immediately asked if she would learn how to save lives. Before the conversation could continue, Ching suddenly entered the room with urgent news. The report was alarming. The rival clan was using the company's financial crisis as an excuse to seize Shin's residence and cover the losses. Lin immediately demanded to know who was pulling the strings behind the operation. Ching confirmed that both Lu and Sun had been seen manipulating the financial department. Seeing the fear in his daughter's eyes, the god of war assured her that he would personally take care of everything and ordered her to focus solely on recovering. Ching volunteered to crush their enemies immediately, but the protagonist chose patience instead. He preferred to wait for the perfect moment to strike, while focusing first on protecting his wife. Back at the office, Shin spent hours drowning in desperation. The situation appeared hopeless. Investors had fled, and every bank had refused to provide financial assistance. With only one day remaining before the deadline imposed on her, the office door suddenly swung open without warning. Sun walked into the room wearing a victorious smile. He had deliberately chosen the worst possible moment to make his move, pretending to offer financial assistance out of goodwill. Maintaining her pride, Shin rejected the fake kindness outright and ordered the con artist to leave immediately. He tightened the pressure, throwing it in Shin's face that her family would soon be homeless, but she refused to budge. Before walking out the door, he played his final card. If she changed her mind, she was to meet him at a hotel room at 9 o'clock the following morning. Shin exploded with outrage, swearing she would never lower herself to someone so disgusting. Sun left without arguing, completely convinced that desperation would eventually force her to surrender. At that moment, Shin became certain that everything had been orchestrated by her cousin. Back at home, Shin's mother was sorting through piles of documents, unable to understand why so much company paperwork had ended up in their house. Shin revealed the harsh truth. Jan was planning to seize the property. The woman panicked over yet another crisis, but quickly demanded that her daughter contact the mysterious tycoon Lin and have him solve the problem. Shin crushed her expectations by admitting that she did not even know who the mysterious man was, immediately becoming the target of her mother's frustration and blame. With no response from the letters she had sent to the influential Wang family, she saw no way out. Accepting Sun's offer seemed like the only painful option left to save her family. At the appointed time, Shin stepped through the hotel doors with her heart pounding. Entering the designated room, she called out to the blackmailer with her head lowered, failing to notice who was actually waiting for her. When the figure standing by the window turned around, she was stunned to find Wang instead. Panic immediately hit her. She assumed that the powerful organizer had joined forces with Sun to crush her company. However, Wang's attitude completely changed the situation. He calmly cleared up the misunderstanding, explaining that his previous disappearance had simply been due to a packed schedule. Then he handed her a check large enough to save her business. Wang revealed that Sun's entire scheme had been sabotaged by Lin's orders. The room number had been changed specifically to keep her away from the trap. Overwhelmed with relief and shock, Shin could barely contain her gratitude. As soon as she left the room, Wang met with the protagonist and reported that the operation had been successful. With his wife safe, Lin finally gave the order to begin the retaliation. Elsewhere in the hotel, Lu was anxiously biting his nails over Shin's delay. While Jan called him to flatter his ego and reassure him that he controlled the entire city, a knock on the door interrupted the conversation. Certain his prey had finally arrived, the playboy opened the door with a smug grin. A boot smashed directly into his face. The kick from Ching launched him across the room, sending him crashing through a table and scattering dishes everywhere as blood poured from his mouth. Dazed and confused, the wealthy heir tried to understand why this woman kept interfering with his plans. That was when Lin stepped into the room. The face seemed familiar, but the presence was terrifying. Without any hesitation, the hero introduced himself as the feared supreme commander of the South. Fear instantly froze Lu in place. He could not understand why a legendary figure of that level would be involved with Shin until Lin slammed him to the floor and declared that she was his wife. The heir immediately fell into denial, unable to accept that the disabled husband he had mocked was actually the most feared warrior in the nation. An overwhelming aura filled the room as Lin coldly informed him that disbelief would not change the tragic fate awaiting him. Grabbing Lu by the collar, Lin lifted him off the ground. The heir still tried to bluff, convinced that his wealth and status would protect him from harm, but he was violently hurled into a wall instead. Broken and bleeding, Lu finally realized the scale of the danger he faced. Panic completely consumed him. The playboy dropped all pride and began begging for his life, offering absurd amounts of money in exchange for mercy. With an amused smile, Lin dismissed the offer, making it clear that no fortune could buy forgiveness from the sovereign of the South. Under Ching's watchful gaze, the warrior snapped the criminal's arm without the slightest hesitation. Leaving his rival writhing on the floor with a shattered body, Lin declared that this was only a warning. The next mistake would be his last. Despite strict recommendations to maintain his anonymity, the hero did not hesitate to reveal his strength. As they walked through the hotel corridors, Ching expressed concern that Lu's clan might seek revenge. The commander's response was short and merciless. If that worm's relatives made a single move against him, their entire bloodline would be erased. The atmosphere of victory vanished in an instant. Ching's phone suddenly rang with an urgent and desperate call from Dr. Chen. Little Ru was gone. She had been kidnapped by unknown enemies. The news shook Lin to his core. Keeping the information hidden from Shin to spare her panic, he and King rushed to the hospital at top speed. Storming into the medical wing, the god of war cornered Dr. Chen and demanded a precise timeline of the disappearance. Shaking uncontrollably, the physician explained that he had only stepped away briefly to arrange physical therapy equipment after serving the girl breakfast. When he returned to the room, the bed was completely empty. The realization that he had failed to protect his own daughter awakened an overwhelming fury inside the protagonist. Blinded by rage, Lin drove his fist directly into the floor, shattering the hospital tiles. Dr. Chen collapsed to his knees in tears, accepting full responsibility for failing to protect the little princess, but the warrior stopped him immediately. Lin insisted that the physician was not at fault. He had simply been performing his duties while the criminals acted from the shadows. Lin's unexpected understanding left Chen speechless. Without wasting another second, the commander ordered Qing to take control of the surveillance center and track the kidnapper's movements. Inside the security office, the guard on duty was completely ignoring his responsibilities and focusing on a game on his phone. Qing appeared behind him like a shadow, informed him about the missing patient, and demanded immediate access to the security footage. The man barely reacted. Instead, he asked for details with open disdain. When he learned that the child had only been missing for an hour, he mocked their concern and explained that protocol required a manual search of the building first. According to him, surveillance footage could only be reviewed after a full 24 hours had passed. The abusive response exhausted the last bit of Lin's patience. In a blur of motion, the guard's phone flew across the room. The man stared in shock. He immediately tried to throw his weight around, shouting that the area was restricted and that the recordings were confidential. Then the atmosphere changed. Lin released a fraction of his killing intent. Realizing that the master was moments away from crushing the man, Qing stepped between them and revealed an official imperial family emblem, the ultimate symbol of absolute authority. The sight of the medallion instantly robbed the employee of his voice. Faced with Lin's deadly glare and Qing's direct order, the guard swallowed his arrogance and rushed to the computer. He searched through the recordings from the past hour until he finally located footage of the young girl's hospital room. Lin watched every second with narrowed eyes and demanded that everyone focus on the lower corner of the screen. The footage revealed the crime. A man disguised as a doctor picked up the unconscious child and disappeared down the hallway. The moment the security guard got a clear look at the kidnapper's silhouette, he turned pale, realizing he knew exactly who it was. The guard identified the suspect on the screen as Xiao Gang, an intern who had joined through a recommendation and had very few friends at the hospital. To make matters worse, the employee revealed that 2 days earlier, the young man had been asking suspicious questions about the building's security system. That clue was enough to push Lin completely over the edge. He gave Qing a ruthless ultimatum. She had exactly 5 minutes to find the target. Without hesitation, the aide vanished from sight. Back in the security room, the guard remained frozen, suffocated by Lin's intimidating presence and terrified of what might happen if he said the wrong thing. The countdown had barely started when Qing returned, throwing the suspect onto the floor at the commander's feet. She reported that her men had surrounded him while he was lurking near the hospital grounds. The criminal tried to keep up the act, claiming innocence and insisting he was simply carrying out his duties as a medical worker. The bluff did not last long. Lin stomped down on the man's shoulder with brutal force, applying so much pressure that the concrete floor cracked beneath him. With his right hand crushed and pinned against the ground, Xiao Gang's agony left both the guard and Qing stunned. Unable to endure the pain any longer, the kidnapper broke and confessed that he had been hired for the job. That admission was exactly what the god of war needed to hear. The confession removed the last barrier holding back Lin's fury. The commander delivered a precise punch that looked almost effortless, yet it crushed the kidnapper internally and sent blood spraying from his mouth. Before the man could even react, the protagonist planted a heavy foot on his chest. pinning him firmly to the floor. When Qing noticed that the criminal was pretending to pass out, she offered to torture him for answers, but Lin refused to waste precious minutes on games. Faced with imminent death, Xiaogang panicked and revealed the entire plan. He had placed little Ru in Sun's car, and Sun had taken her directly to his private estate. Hearing the mastermind's name only confirmed Lin's suspicions and identified the next target. The accomplice begged for mercy, claiming he had been forced into the scheme, but to the god of war, the crime was too unforgivable for any form of leniency. Lin ordered Qing to give the traitor the punishment he deserved and immediately set out to storm the enemy's hideout. At Sun's isolated mansion, the atmosphere was tense. Bound to a chair, little Ru faced her captor with remarkable courage. She demanded to be released and warned that the authorities would hunt him down. Sun simply laughed mockingly, convinced that his family's influence made him untouchable through legal means. Consumed by malice, he blamed Shin for his own financial downfall while roughly squeezing the hostage's cheeks. Even while hurt, Ru defended her mother's integrity and confidently declared that her father would come to rescue her. The mention of the hero instantly enraged Sun. He struck the little girl on the forehead, called Lin trash, and blamed him for all his misfortune. Her cries echoed throughout the room, only to be cut short by the violent sound of shattering glass. The ceiling practically collapsed along with the protagonist's patience. Appearing like a shadow behind Sun, Lin drove a devastating punch straight into the criminal's face. The impact launched him through the air and into a wall, which shattered under the force. The moment Ru saw her father, her tears stopped instantly. Lin cut the ropes binding her to the chair and assured her that the nightmare was over while carefully checking her injuries. The little girl pointed to her forehead and explained how her uncle had attacked her, though she insisted the pain had vanished the moment her hero arrived. Holding his daughter in his arms, Lin asked whether she was ready to watch the bad guy get what he deserved. Ru nodded, only regretting that she could not remember which hand her attacker had used to hurt her. Seeing an opportunity, Sun made a desperate dash toward the street, convinced that Lin would not cause a scene in public. He forgot one important fact. The god of war's speed was merciless. In the blink of an eye, the hero cut off his escape route. Lin stared at the coward and made it clear that the game would end only when he allowed it to. Desperate, Sun tried to strike the arm protecting the child and then ran while screaming for his parents to help him. The counterattack was a complete disaster. Lin stopped the movement effortlessly and, with a sharp crack, broke Sun's arm, causing him to howl in agony. Annoyed by the noise, Ru covered her ears. Her father promised to silence the disturbance immediately. Intense blue flames erupted from his left hand. The fire struck his rival, extinguishing his consciousness and reducing his screams to barely audible whispers before he collapsed onto the floor. The execution, however, was interrupted by the echo of a furious shout. The leader of the rival family had just burst into the estate. The patriarch rushed inside in complete desperation, begging for Sun's life. When he saw the heir's mangled body, his chest scarred by burns, and his consciousness gone, the man nearly collapsed. Left with no alternatives, he dropped to his knees before the god of war and pleaded for mercy, blaming everything on the young man's foolishness. Lin remained unmoved. Harming his daughter was an unforgivable offense. The clan leader realized far too late that he had no way out. The tension increased when Qing suddenly arrived and confirmed that the hospital was completely secure. Any lingering fear in little Ru disappeared once Lin reassured her and introduced the newcomer as a trusted ally. To clear the battlefield and spare the child from witnessing what came next, the protagonist entrusted his daughter to Qing's care. She immediately departed with the girl. Free from distractions, the Supreme Commander finally unleashed the full weight of his overwhelming presence, reminding his enemies that his patience and mercy had run out. The father made one final desperate attempt to intimidate him with words, but it was completely useless. While the wounded young man tried to crawl away, Lin ended the matter with a single fatal move. The patriarch could do nothing but watch as his successor met his definitive end. Without showing the slightest trace of pity, Lin grabbed the stunned man by the head and delivered his ultimatum. The entire clan had exactly 24 hours to disappear from the city. If any trace of their existence remained after that deadline, they would be beheaded without exception. Faced with certain death, the old man accepted exile as the only way to survive. Meanwhile, at another elite mansion, the powerful head of the Liu family stormed into the room of his battered son fuming with rage. The moment he saw the heir in such a broken state, the wealthy patriarch swore to tear apart whoever had caused that humiliation. The spoiled playboy considered speaking up and demanding revenge like he always did, but Lin's warning echoed through his mind. He knew that revealing the name of the god of war would bring total destruction upon his bloodline. For everyone's sake, the young man swallowed his pride and remained completely silent, apathetic, and leaving his father entirely in the dark. The leader of the Lu clan completely lost his temper and slapped his own son across the face. Furious, the patriarch demanded respect, reminding the young man that they were the true rulers of that city. The injured heir kept the secret to himself, mentally weighing whether the rival Yan family truly possessed that much power and deciding to hide Lin's identity to avoid an even greater tragedy. Calling his son weak, the clan leader revealed that he had already assigned a professional spy to investigate the matter. Moments later, an informant emerged from the shadows and confirmed that the mysterious attacker had direct ties to the Yan clan. Determined to wipe his rivals off the map, the patriarch demanded the rest of the report. Then came the true horror. Son had been murdered, and the killer was the same man who had crippled his son the previous night. Panic immediately gripped the clan leader as he realized his family was next on the list. Calling his fallen allies failures for dying so easily, the patriarch channeled his fear into pure hatred, plotting a deadly ambush against the Yan family during the night of Binhai's grand celebration. The story shifts to the hospital, where Shin finally arrived to pick up her daughter. Carrying a cake to celebrate her recovery, she entered the room expecting a joyful reunion, only to find the bed completely empty. Panic hit instantly. The mother called out for her daughter through the hallways, and when only silence answered, the cake slipped from her trembling hands and shattered on the floor. Her despair was broken only when Rue's voice echoed nearby. Shin rushed toward her daughter in overwhelming relief, trying to spare her mother from further worry. The little girl lied and claimed that Lin had only shown up to take her outside to play, leaving the protagonist shocked and increasingly concerned about her husband's constant involvement. Shin firmly believed that her husband had never left the house throughout the entire ordeal, hidden nearby. Lin witnessed his wife's unconditional love, seeing how she placed their daughter's safety above everything else. Deeply moved and feeling indebted to her for all her devotion, the hero revealed himself and interrupted Shin's thoughts. He informed her that they needed to leave, as the upcoming Binhai celebration required immediate preparation. The protagonist had made up his mind. That night would be the final confrontation to secure his family's peace once and for all. Elsewhere in the city, a powerful man lounged beside a swimming pool, savoring a glass of wine. He questioned his subordinate about the rumors surrounding Lin's triumphant return. The servant confirmed the reports, emphasizing that the god of war had already crushed and exiled an entire clan from the region. The Dragon Lord dismissed the news, viewing Lin's actions as nothing more than a cheap performance from someone who had already lost his political relevance. The subordinate insisted that the hero posed a genuine threat to the imperial throne and suggested an immediate execution. The employee's audacity enraged the ruler. Without even leaving the water, the Dragon Lord unleashed a burst of energy that sent the subordinate flying, making it clear that no one had permission to dictate his orders. Even while injured on the ground, the servant continued warning about the danger of keeping the god of war alive. The master, however, saw Lin as a useful asset because of his immense popularity among civilians, intending to use him as a public puppet at the right moment. As soon as the servant departed after promising to adjust the plans, the Dragon Lord walked to the center of the pool and attempted to summon his battle spear through mystical powers. Instead, the sacred weapon rejected his command, revealing that something had gone terribly wrong. Crimson streams of energy slithered across the entire length of the sacred spear. The backlash was so violent that the Dragon Lord was thrown backward, suffering a severe burn on his own hand while trying to control the artifact. Faced with that rejection, he concluded that Lin's life force was still active and thriving, demanding immediate action. Strange mystical eyes emerged from the ruler's damaged palm, gathering an immense amount of destructive power. Unable to force the relic into submission, the Emperor chose a more drastic solution. He fired a divine beam that while his insane laughter echoed throughout the palace. Far away, the night remained peaceful at Lin's residence, with the family completely unaware of the chaos unfolding outside. That peace shattered when the protagonist felt a devastating spiritual impact, freezing in shock as he realized that the Thunder Spear no longer existed. Noticing the sudden paleness on his master's face, Dr. Chen asked what had happened. Lin immediately questioned the whereabouts of the artifact, and the physician reminded him that the royal family had confiscated the relic after the border conflict ended, emphasizing that the weapon would never accept a new owner. The revelation that the divine weapon had been destroyed just minutes earlier left his ally stunned, unable to understand how such a powerful object could vanish so easily. Lin solved the mystery immediately. It was a direct provocation from the only man capable of such a feat, the same individual who would be attending the Binhai event. Returning to his wheelchair to maintain his disguise, the god of war swore to reclaim every piece of his former glory. The calm was broken by the approach of a dark presence. A camouflaged assassin scaled the perimeter and launched a razor-sharp projectile directly at the window. The glass exploded into countless shards as the object shot through the room at deadly speed. Ching reacted purely on instinct to intercept the attack, but Lin was faster. With flawless precision, he dodged and caught the enemy blade between his fingers, emerging without a single scratch. While his assistant rushed off to pursue the fleeing intruder, the hero carefully examined the markings engraved into the metal dagger. The peaceful atmosphere completely collapsed when strange noises echoed throughout the house, interrupting the rest of the mother and her daughter. Before they could figure out where the sounds were coming from, a sudden blackout swallowed the entire home. Panic struck hard. In the middle of the darkness, the girl let out a scream after spotting the silhouette of a mysterious figure standing just a few feet away and staring directly at them. The masked intruder silently evaluated his targets before delivering his verdict. The price for protecting the wrong person would be paid with their lives. The threat immediately became action as a purple energy began glowing in the criminal's hand, ready to strike. The mother panics and desperately tries to buy her own survival by offering every dollar she has, but the assassin only mocks her plea, suggesting she take the money to the grave. In absolute terror, the daughter clings tightly to her mother, expecting the worst. The tragedy seemed unavoidable until a hand suddenly appeared out of nowhere and stopped the mercenary's arm cold. Lin stepped in and shattered the fear, effortlessly twisting the attacker's wrist. Disgusted by the cowardice of targeting defenseless victims, he took full responsibility for keeping his family safe. The battle erupted instantly. Lin unleashed an intense blue flash of energy, while the intruder focused all his power into his remaining fist. Both attacked at the same time, creating a collision of force that canceled out both strikes. Underestimating Lin and finding the situation amusing, the masked man let out a sarcastic laugh, pulled out a knife, and continued the fight. The tension reached its peak when the sound of the front door signaled someone's arrival. The intruder noticed it and attempted to throw Lin off balance with a quick taunt about who might be coming inside. Lin did not hesitate for even a fraction of a second. When Shin finally stepped through the entrance, she was met with complete silence. The entire battle had seemingly vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the mother and daughter frozen in shock by what they had just witnessed. Confusion lingered in the air as Yang asked about her sister's whereabouts and found Shin standing there completely stunned. In the darkness, she felt her way toward the light switch. The moment the lights came back on, the shock was immediate. The living room was covered with signs of a violent struggle. Faced with her mother's lingering terror, Yang explained the mercenaries' attack and how someone had appeared to stop the disaster. She described the mysterious savior, noting how much he resembled the man they had seen at Axon's party. After hearing the story, Rui sprinted outside while shouting proudly that her father was the hero who had saved the family. The grandmother, however, simply scoffed, maintaining her usual contempt for him. Far away from the house, the situation was entirely different. The hero confronted the criminal who had managed to escape and was now examining a golden dagger. Ching appeared through the window, frustrated that the target had gotten away. Unbothered by the failure, Lin ignored the setback and focused on the weapon. The moment Ching saw it, she turned pale after recognizing the crest of the Dragon Lord's servants. The connection to the night's event in Binhai became obvious. An ambush was being prepared. He immediately dispatched Ching with direct orders to contact Wang and ensure Axon's protection, fully aware that he was the true target of the trap. The tension eased briefly when his daughter burst into the room full of excitement. She jumped into her father's arms, completely convinced of his heroism in saving the family. He welcomed her with a smile but asked a thoughtful question about how she would feel if he were not the hero she imagined him to be. With the simple faith of a child, Rui replied that as long as he kept her safe, he would always be her hero. The moment was interrupted by Axon, who asked the girl not to tire him out. She gently took the child from his arms, determined to let him rest while the growing weight of everything they had learned about the Binhai event continued to settle in. Axon watched her husband, hoping he would finally wake up. The silence was broken by the sound of her phone. On the other end, Wang informed her that the event had been moved up and that transportation would arrive to pick her up the following day. Axon tried to decline, but Wang remained firm. He emphasized that beyond simply holding an invitation, she was considered an honored guest. With no room left to refuse, she accepted, apologized for her hesitation, and before hanging up, asked Ru to watch over her father's sleep. The little girl, glowing with happiness, assured her mother that she felt safe simply being by his side. The next day arrived quickly, and the night of the Binhai celebration revealed a luxurious estate decorated with extravagant displays of wealth. Axon, however, could barely enjoy any of it. The recent attack on their home still haunted her thoughts. Her mother, as cold as ever, interrupted her concerns with insults, belittling her children and demanding that Axon stop wasting time and focus on finding an influential suitor. The atmosphere grew heavy when Shin noticed her grandfather arriving alongside Jang. The reunion was hostile from the start. Consumed by anger, Jang immediately confronted her cousin. The surrounding group watched the two women arrive and, with open disdain, questioned how they had managed to enter without invitations. Before the situation could spiral out of control, they demanded respect by revealing that they were special guests personally invited and brought there by Wang himself. The revelation stunned everyone present, while one of the young men found himself captivated by Yang's beauty. As the women searched for a more suitable place to walk around, Jang lost her patience and demanded that they leave, insisting that the invitation they possessed actually belonged to her family. She demanded that the document be returned immediately. During the argument, a nearby man noticed the invitation and froze upon recognizing its purple and gold colors. It carried the seal of the imperial family. Silence spread through the crowd as rumors about the growing connection between the Yian and Hang families began circulating. The tension reached a breaking point when a man suddenly appeared, snatched the invitation from their hands, and loudly accused them of carrying a forgery. Any attempt to recover the invitation proved useless. The man held on to it and arrogantly declared it fake. The excitement within the Jian family was abruptly shattered by the public accusation. Trying to limit the damage, the grandfather urged caution and introduced Zhou, a highly influential gentleman. The presence of someone so important transformed Jang's nervousness into a mix of irritation and a desperate search for allies, while members of the family openly questioned why the Jian family's trash had been allowed into such an exclusive gathering. The grandfather bowed and formally apologized for the behavior of his relatives. Zhou merely smiled, ignored the apology, and casually tossed the invitation aside. Then his tone shifted into a direct threat. He blamed the Jian family for the attack on Lu and demanded compensation, promising severe consequences if the matter was not resolved. Confused and cornered, Jang attempted to deny any involvement. Her eyes eventually landed on Shin, and her malicious side took over. She grabbed Shin by the arm and accused her of injuring Lu in an attempt to elevate her own status. Shin remained calm, denied everything, and stated that she had no idea what had happened. Lu's father ignored her defense entirely and delivered a humiliating ultimatum. If the truth did not come to light, the entire Yang family would be driven out of the city. The tension is shattered by Huang's arrival as he enters the hall accompanied by the protagonist, his daughter, and the king. Huang immediately restores order, making it clear that he will not tolerate family disputes at an event of such importance. The moment Rui spots her mother, she runs happily to her father's side, excitedly mentioning the surprise they had prepared for her. Zhou watches the newly arrived group with obvious contempt. He demands to know who these people are that dare interrupt the scene. With a mocking tone, Lu's father points to the protagonist sitting in his wheelchair and identifies him as Shin's husband, Lin Feng, before gesturing toward the little girl. The instant Zhou hears the explanation, he bursts into laughter, treating their presence as a complete joke. Zhou laughs so hard that tears begin forming in his eyes as he mocks the idea of a loser like Lin being present in such a hall. The ridicule, however, dies the moment Lin speaks. With icy calm, the protagonist asks what exactly the man intends to do next. Shin stands frozen, barely able to believe that her husband has emerged from the condition he was in. Beside her, Rui feels completely vindicated, finally having proof that she had not lied about her father's recovery. The image of Lin as a useless cripple crumbles before everyone's eyes. Letting out a dismissive snort, he rises from the wheelchair. A heavy and sinister aura pours from his body, silencing the entire hall. Caught off guard, Zhou attempts to hide his shock behind an empty threat, promising to break Lin's legs for what happened to Lu. Overwhelmed with emotion, Shin breaks down in tears, but Lin reassures her, calmly promising that the nightmare is over. Driven mad by his audacity, Jang rushes at him with her fists raised, demanding an explanation for his sudden recovery. Lin brushes her aside with a simple movement and leaves her punishment to Qing. The subordinate wastes no time, delivering a sharp slap across her face. Even with the mark of the strike visible, Jang refuses to abandon her arrogance, while Joe resumes his insults, insisting that even standing on his feet, Lin remains a worthless cripple. Lu's father eagerly agrees, dripping with contempt. Lin remains completely unaffected by the insults. With chilling calm, he delivers a sentence. Within 5 minutes, the Lu family will be erased from Beiji City. Qing confirms that the countdown has already begun. Zhou and Patriarch Lu burst into laughter, treating the threat as a ridiculous joke. Their amusement is abruptly cut short by the ringing of the old man's phone. His expression changes dramatically during the call. The voice on the other end is crystal clear. The company has collapsed. Desperate investors are pulling out every dollar they can, and the Lu Empire has just vanished overnight. Panic sweeps through the hall. Beyond the investor exodus, banks have completely cut ties with the company, leaving it buried beneath billions in debt. Frozen by shock, Lu's father feels the ground disappear beneath his feet. Joe falls into absolute panic after realizing that his own family's capital, heavily invested in the business, has just turned to dust. Seeing the abyss opening before him, the old man crawls to Lin's feet and begs for mercy, receiving nothing but a look of pure disdain in return. Joe, however, refuses to bend. Convinced that Lin is still a nobody, he stubbornly relies on his own status and strength. The protagonist steps forward, releasing an aura of terror that makes the very air tremble. Wearing an icy smile, he asks whether Joe is ready. Fear tightens the man's throat. He stumbles backward and desperately invokes his position as an envoy of the royal family. Displaying his official insignia, he claims that Supreme Commander Lin is supposedly in the capital receiving medical treatment. The lie does not last long. Lin snatches the emblem from Joe's hand. Trembling, the man screams that such an act is an unforgivable crime against the royal family. Without hesitation, Lin releases a flash of blue energy and crushes the insignia with his bare hands. He openly declares that the story about his stay in the capital is nothing more than a fabrication. Terrified by the consequences of destroying a royal symbol, Jang begs her grandfather to distance the Jian family from this madman. Defending her father, Rui fires back that he does not need titles to solve his problems and that unlike Jang's family, he is a man of courage. Jang completely loses control and lunges at the little girl, but Lin intercepts her with overwhelming force and sends her flying. A sharp slap echoes throughout the hall, silencing Jang's insults, though she continues screaming that he is nothing but trash. At last, reality crashes down on Joe. He notices Lin's bearing, authority, and overwhelming presence. His voice trembling, he asks whether Lin is actually the supreme leader of the Southern Territory. The silence that follows is broken by Qing's return. She rushes back to her master carrying a military uniform that leaves absolutely no room for doubt about the true identity of the man everyone had dared to challenge. Moments later, the protagonist appears dressed in full military uniform, his presence dominating the room. He confirms his identity. He is the supreme ruler of the Southern Territory, though he allows everyone to simply call him Lin Feng. Stunned beyond belief, Shin asks whether this powerful man has truly been the same person standing beside her all this time. With a gentle smile, he confirms it. Shock sweeps through the hall. Frozen in place, Jang is consumed by both regret and fury after realizing she lost a man of such magnitude to her own cousin. Old Master Li, the royal family's physician, appears amid the chaos and immediately kneels before Lin, pledging absolute loyalty. The protagonist asks him to abandon such formalities, but the atmosphere remains tense. Still trapped in denial, Joe shouts that everything is fake and accuses Lin of hiring actors to play their roles. Unable to tolerate such disrespect, Dr. Lee drives a powerful punch into Joe's stomach. Joe collapses to the floor, writhing in pain while threatening the physician with his family's influence. Before he can finish the threat, another strike crashes into his face and silences him completely. Lin turns toward one and orders the immediate expulsion of the Shou, Liu, and Jian families. They are not invited, he declares. Only after the intruders are removed will the banquet officially begin. Desperate to reverse the situation, Jang shouts that Shin should be expelled as well, because she belongs to the same family. The grandfather watches his granddaughter in stunned silence as the truth finally settles over Chang and Shin's mother. They have both realized the same thing. The man they spent years humiliating was actually the most feared and respected man in the entire nation. As the Jian family is dragged out in disgrace and defeat, the hall lights up with celebration. The nobles raise their glasses in a unified toast, honoring the Supreme Commander's triumphant return and celebrating the rare opportunity to witness the hero's power firsthand. The banquet continues, fueled by mockery and whispered conversations. The grandfather, finally connecting the dots, admits that Lin's reputation as a legendary general before his paralysis now makes perfect sense. His granddaughter, however, remains blinded by pride and insists that the protagonist is nothing more than a fraud. She is already plotting her next move, swearing that she will seduce Lin, convinced that Shin could never be worthy of a man of his stature. Miles away in the capital, chaos reigns. The young emperor, the Dragon Lord, receives news of Zhou's defeat, his humiliating expulsion from the banquet, and, worst of all, the destruction of the royal seal. The monarch's fury erupts instantly. Suspecting that Qing has abandoned the crown to kneel before Lin, the emperor completely loses control. His voice, infused with purple energy, traps the trembling servant, who can barely speak. The order comes down like a death sentence. The Shou family is granted full authority to wipe out the Jian clan and complete permission to deploy the secret weapon against Lin if necessary. Raging uncontrollably, the emperor curses himself for not finishing Lin off while he was still confined to that wheelchair. By the end of the celebration, peace returns to the home of Lin, Shin, and Rui. Shin's mother, never satisfied, treats the day's success like a priceless treasure. Rui notices the worried expression hidden beneath her mother's victorious appearance and quietly points it out to her father. The moment they walk through the door, Shin's mother excitedly displays a fortune in jewelry gifted by nobles hoping to gain favor now that everyone knows she is the mother-in-law of the supreme ruler. The dazzling treasures completely captivate the women, who squeal with excitement while ignoring Shin's serious expression. Maintaining her composure, Shin asks everyone to be quiet. She and Lin need to discuss something important. Ignoring her mother's obsession with the jewels, she sends Rui to her room, promising that her father will visit shortly to tuck her into bed. The little girl obeys. Once the room empties, a heavy silence settles over the house. Every pair of eyes turns toward Lin as the inevitable question is finally asked. When exactly did he regain consciousness? Lin explains that his awakening happened suddenly at the moment he witnessed his daughter being humiliated. Through tears and frustration, Shin responds with a slap across his face, demanding to know why he had not stepped in sooner and spared them so much suffering. Gently holding her hands, Lin admits that he has been conscious for some time but kept up the act because he feared she might choose a different path if she knew the truth. Looking away, Shin bitterly admits that her only motivation throughout all those years of hardship was securing Rui's safety and future. Lin pulls her into an embrace and assures her that she and Rui are his only priorities, and that from this day forward, nobody will ever harm them again. The peace is short-lived. Lin's attention soon shifts back to the battlefield of strategy. It is time to awaken his royal bloodline and locate the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and Suan in order to put his plan into motion. The following morning, breakfast is interrupted by Chang, who arrives carrying the hottest topic on the internet. Social media has exploded with images of Lin, confirming his identity as the legendary general. Lin responds with complete indifference, saying she is free to believe whatever she wants. When she attempts to move closer and force a false sense of intimacy, he thanks her for her fake concern with a cold smile. The atmosphere is shattered by the sound of the front door bursting open. Shin's mother storms inside like a hurricane, accompanied by Chan and carrying an envelope that supposedly proves Lin is a fraud. The old woman accuses him of placing the Yan family in danger by pretending to be the supreme commander. Remaining calm, Shin questions the validity of the accusation. Under her mother's smug gaze, she opens the envelope and discovers the supposed evidence, a forged report claiming that Lin is an unemployed nobody born in an insignificant village called Nilu. Shin's shock never turns into doubt. She remains firmly by her husband's side, completely unfazed. Lin looks directly at Chan and demands that she get to the point. Overflowing with arrogance, Shin's cousin proudly announces the grandfather's decision, the family's permanent expulsion from the clan, Shin's immediate removal from the company, and an eviction order from the home they currently occupy. Ignoring the intruder's arrogance, Lin turns his attention to his daughter. With a calmness that sharply contrasts the tension in the room, he asks whether she would like to live in a house beside Lake Vigu. Still uncertain about the future, the little girl nods. Shin, however, can barely hide her fear at the prospect of losing everything, but Lin firmly takes her hand and eases her worries. While Shin's mother continues spewing insults and calling them failures, Lin shields his family from the negativity. He makes a single call to Ching and orders transportation to the lakeside estate. Chan bursts into laughter, convinced the idea is ridiculous, since only the elite can afford to live in such a place. She continues mocking them, shouting that they are nothing but liars and soon-to-be homeless drifters. Lin refuses to waste another second on her. Instead, he simply guides his wife and daughter out of the house, a wedding gift that, in his eyes, no longer holds any value. Ching's arrival changes the atmosphere instantly. The moment Chan recognizes the subordinate, reality finally hits her. The pieces of the puzzle fall into place, and panic takes hold. Lin's identity is not a scam or a fabrication, it is an undeniable truth. Realizing the magnitude of her mistake, the cousin desperately tries to switch sides, pulling her mother along and urging her to follow them so they will not lose their connection to supreme power. Yet Shin's mother remains stubbornly rooted in place, still convinced that Lin is nothing more than an imposter. Frustrated and ignored by everyone, Chan erupts into complaints as Lin's family walks away from the past that tried so hard to destroy them. Their arrival at the new estate marks the beginning of a completely different life. Rui runs through the mansion with tears of happiness in her eyes, while Lin instructs Ching to focus on protecting the girl so she can safely explore her new home. Noticing the hesitation on Shin's face, Lin asks what is troubling her. She admits that she is afraid she will wake up and discover that everything is just a dream. Gently touching her face, he promises that this reality is real and that the years of suffering are finally over. Even though he has not yet recovered the full extent of his power, he reaffirms his promise to stand as her shield against every threat that may come. To break the tension, Lin casually revealed that he had purchased the only oceanfront villa in the entire Binhai region and asked whether she approved of his choice. Shin finally let out a laugh, teasing him about the affectionate side that the legendary Supreme Commander reserved exclusively for the people he loved. The brief moment of warmth was interrupted by a phone call. Lin stepped away to answer it. When he returned, his expression had changed to one of duty. The military had summoned him. He would be away from home for 2 or 3 days. Shin felt the familiar weight of uncertainty and the fear of being left behind. But she forced a brave smile and assured him that she would take care of everything so he could focus on his responsibilities. Pressing a kiss against her forehead, he comforted her and promised that Ching would remain behind as an unwavering guardian. Hours later, the protagonist entered military headquarters. The moment Long saw him, he rushed forward and embraced him without hiding how much he had missed him. The soldiers nearby watched in confusion, unable to recognize the man standing before them, until Long's voice echoed across the room and clarified everything. That man was Supreme Commander Lin, the highest-ranking leader of Binhai's military forces. The confusion instantly transformed into reverence as every soldier lowered his head in respect, while Long resumed his position under the command of the leader who had finally returned. The transition of power became the focus of their conversation. During Lin's recovery, Long had temporarily served as Supreme Commander, but now he wished to step down and retire from military life altogether. Lin questioned the decision, surprised that someone who had only recently earned the rank of Major General would retire so early. With a weary sigh, Long explained that the military was no longer what it once had been. Royal family appointees were gradually taking over key positions, weakening the institution from within. Lin's return represented the first glimmer of hope the army had seen in years. Lin immediately recognized the pattern. Royal influence was no longer limited to the highest levels of government, it was infiltrating every command structure. When Long asked whether that suspicion was correct, Lin confirmed it. In fact, that was the very reason he had been summoned. Relieved by his leader's presence, Long handed over a collection of classified files. The documents detailed every change in military leadership since Lin's downfall, along with alarming reports regarding the ongoing conflict along the border. Lin reviewed the information with cold precision, noting that stability should theoretically have been maintained under noble leadership. Long immediately disagreed. That assumption was exactly why disaster had struck. Members of the royal family were politicians, not soldiers. They knew nothing about warfare or leadership in battle. While the southern territories appeared calm on the surface, 10 cities in the northwest had already been reduced to rubble by relentless bombardments, and complete silence surrounded the catastrophe. No information was reaching headquarters. Lin asked directly whether the White Tiger was still stationed there and whether the defensive positions had fallen. Long confirmed the worst. The messenger had been silent for 5 months, leaving the fate of the Northwest shrouded in darkness. Lin unfolded the final message left behind by the White Tiger. The report confirmed every nightmare. The Northwest had fallen beneath enemy fire, the royal family's betrayal ran deeper than anyone imagined, and the spy, having lost all hope, begged that no one waste tears mourning him. Rage exploded within Lin. Long observed that it was suspicious for the Dragon Lord to allow such chaos to unfold, suggesting that his obsession with absolute power had blinded the crown itself. Lin revealed that he had already dispatched agents to the capital, convinced that the monarch was willing to sell out the entire nation in pursuit of greed. Meanwhile, 2 days later, the Jian Company headquarters had become a monument to failure. Shin's grandfather, consumed by bitter regret, questioned whether expelling his granddaughter had been the greatest mistake of his life. Jiang, oblivious to the collapse surrounding her, remained focused on appearances and stubbornly insisted that Lin was a fraud. The financial reports, however, told a different story. Partners had abandoned them, investments had disappeared, and the family had been left in ruin. The old man slammed his fist against the desk and shouted that every investor had followed Lin instead. Cornered but still cynical, Jiang attempted to blame Shin's management, only to be cut off. There was only one option left. The final card was the will left behind by the previous patriarch, a document meant to be opened only in the family's darkest hour. It represented the clan's last hope for survival. That same night, Lin returned home. Upon entering, he found Shin asleep on the couch. He gently draped his jacket over her shoulders and carefully woke her. Relieved to see him safely home, she suggested that they finally get some rest. The peaceful moment did not last long. A figure appeared outside the window. It was Qing. Lin met with her immediately and asked for her report. The spy delivered 3 devastating updates. First, after Shin's departure, Jian Company had lost its remaining business partners, making bankruptcy unavoidable. Second, the family's network of influence had completely collapsed. Third, Dragon Master had been placed under custody after being stripped of authority by hidden rivals. The situation surrounding Jian Company had become critical. Shin's departure triggered a chain reaction that pushed the corporation to the edge of insolvency. At the same time, the Dragon Master had been overthrown and detained. Most troubling of all, the White Tiger's trail ended in the Masterless Kingdom on the northwestern border, a region that had already been reduced to ruins. Lin immediately understood the danger. Both internal and external instability were rapidly approaching. At sunrise, the hero transformed the kitchen into a feast. The aroma alone woke the household. Still sleepy, Rui stared in amazement at the massive spread of food while Lin dedicated the breakfast to both her and her mother. Shin appeared shortly afterward, looking exhausted. Lin gently guided her to a seat and jokingly pointed out how little sleep she had gotten while waiting for him to return. She admitted that during the long night, she had started planning how to find a new job. The peaceful atmosphere was shattered by her mother's voice, demanding compensation for the 2 years Lin had spent confined to a wheelchair. She blamed him for all the family's misfortunes. Shin immediately stepped in and tried to silence her, but the older woman refused to stop insulting him. With an amused smile, Lin admitted that his mother-in-law was partially right. The financial stability of the household needed to be secured. The conversation turned serious when he asked about the circumstances surrounding his father-in-law's death. Shin explained that it had officially been ruled a car accident, but admitted that the story had always been suspicious. Rumors persisted that her own grandfather may have orchestrated the tragedy to eliminate his son, who had been designated as the direct heir to the Yang family fortune, a legacy from which both Shin and her mother had been ruthlessly excluded. Little Rui, outraged by the injustice, demanded that someone make things right. When Jiang tried to scold her, claiming that a child could not possibly understand such a complicated matter, Rui proudly showed off a necklace her grandfather had given her. Lin took the jewelry into his hands and examined it carefully. The glow of the piece left no room for doubt. It was not an ordinary ornament, but an artifact crafted from evolution stones. The truth behind the stolen inheritance was finally beginning to surface. Shin stared at the necklace and remembered seeing it inside her father's office years ago. She knew the item concealed a secret. Members of the royal bloodline possessed hereditary abilities that required hidden techniques and special catalysts to awaken. Suddenly, a vibrant blue pulse erupted from the necklace and flooded Lin's hand with energy. Before he could react, Rui grabbed the stone. The brilliant light swallowed her whole, causing both parents to cry out in panic. The energy was absorbed directly into the girl's body, and she collapsed to the ground. Seconds later, she climbed back to her feet, dizzy and confused, describing a strange sensation she could not explain. Lin immediately understood what had happened. The evolution stone had resonated with his energy and chosen Rui as its successor. The bloodline had awakened. Without hesitation, he attempted to contact Dr. Li, but the connection abruptly failed. Meanwhile, Rui's power began manifesting physically. She floated into the air while silverware throughout the room danced uncontrollably, pulled by an overwhelming magnetic force. The entire house became a zone of instability. Outside, Jiang was relaxing on the beach, completely unaware of the danger, until a thunderous explosion from the mansion jolted her awake. Lin burst outside carrying Rui in his arms, while Shin desperately shouted for her sister to get away and warned of imminent danger. Jang tried to process the chaos, but her answer came from above. The sunlight vanished beneath an enormous shadow. She froze as she saw an impossible wall of water rising over the coastline. A gigantic wave towered above the shore before crashing down with overwhelming force. Shin screamed for Jang to run, but her cousin stood frozen in terror, incapable of moving a single muscle as disaster descended upon them. The impact left everyone convinced that a military invasion from the sea had begun. Shin, however, wasted no time. She charged directly into the chaos, rescuing anyone she could while panic spread across the coast. Once the group reached safety, Dr. Lee questioned Lin about the true nature of Rui's bloodline. The hero's answer was absolute. Rui possessed a legendary electromagnetic ability so rare that most people believed it existed only in folklore. No matter the cost, he would protect her. Once it was confirmed that the entire 10-mile stretch of coastline had been evacuated, the group isolated themselves and began preparations. Dr. Lee started the acupuncture treatment and warned everyone that the process involved 9 forbidden stages of unlocking. Every needle was pure torture. As each meridian point was opened, hidden substances were extracted from Lin's back, causing agonizing screams to echo through the area. The pain was unbearable, but the hero endured it through sheer willpower. 5 layers had already been removed, leaving 4 more before the ritual would be complete. Ru watched through tears, sobbing as she witnessed her father's suffering, yet the procedure could not be stopped. As night fell, dark clouds covered the sky. A lone figure appeared aboard a solitary boat and signaled to a hidden fleet that the time to advance had arrived. Before the invasion could begin, however, the intruder found himself face to face with a terrifying presence. Lin stood before him, radiating pure hatred. Desperate, the enemy reached for his radio to warn his master, but a bolt of blue lightning descended from the heavens and instantly reduced him to ashes. The devastating electrical strike erased him before a single warning could be delivered. Lin turned toward Qing with sparks of fury burning in his eyes. He reprimanded her for the serious failure. She had assured him the perimeter was secure, yet enemy forces had crossed the border undetected. The warrior lowered her head, fully aware of her mistake, and begged forgiveness while the tension of the coming battle continued to rise. After dealing with the threat, the hero returned home to care for his wife. Shin was bedridden with a severe fever and required complete rest. While she murmured incoherently in her sleep, Lin remained at her side. Eventually, however, he was forced to leave to discuss urgent matters with Long. Shin's weakened condition caused her to awaken worried about Rui's whereabouts. Lin immediately reassured her that their daughter was safe under Dr. Lee's protection. In another room, the physician was trying to understand the nature of Rui's transformation. Still confused, the girl admitted that she did not understand her new senses and believed only her father could explain them. At that moment, Lin entered carrying Shin in his arms, leading to an emotional reunion between mother and daughter. Staying focused on what needed to be done, the hero gently pulled Rui away from her recovering mother and announced that he needed to take her with him. Shin's concern was immediate, and the question she feared most finally emerged. Lin explained the truth. The awakening of Rui's royal bloodline required specialized training, and Dr. Lee was the only person qualified to guide her. The physician reinforced the urgency by revealing that the peace being advertised by the capital was nothing more than a lie designed to conceal the massacre taking place in the northwest. The regime that had seized the throne had become a mortal enemy. Without proper preparation, Shin and Ru would become Lin's most vulnerable weaknesses. Shin resisted the idea, terrified of another separation. With patience and understanding, Lin proposed that the training last only 1 year. He promised that Rui would receive every piece of knowledge she needed and swore that no harm would come to her. In the end, the choice was left to the girl herself. Seeing the dangers threatening her father and fearing that he might one day return to the helpless man confined to a wheelchair, Ru made her decision. Determined to become his shield, she accepted Dr. Lee's training. The physician praised the child's courage and insisted they leave immediately. Before boarding the transport, Rui handed her father a diary and asked him to keep it safe as a connection between them until they met again. With the honesty of a child who was not yet ready for goodbye, she admitted that this was the hardest moment of her life. Even so, she departed with the determination of someone who already understood the weight of destiny. The short time they had shared since Lin's awakening had not been enough to make up for years of separation. With a heavy heart, he apologized for all the years he had been absent. Eager to begin her journey, Rui hurried Dr. Li along and left before Shin could even manage a proper farewell. The girl disappeared into the distance, but in her heart a promise had already been made. She would return as the shield that protected both of her parents. Back inside the mansion, Lin tried to comfort his wife, but the responsibilities of a supreme commander allowed no room for rest. He confirmed that he would soon have to leave once again, as the reports coming from the northwest demanded immediate attention. Even so, he promised that he would settle every remaining matter before departing. The next morning, their destination was the Yang family village. Shin was confused by the unexpected stop, but Lin simply asked her to trust him. The silence didn't last long. Shin's grandfather and Jang appeared, demanding an explanation for what they called an intrusion. Wasting no time, Lin handed Shin the envelope he had brought and instructed her to throw it at the old man's feet. The documents, the result of a meticulous investigation, revealed a horrifying truth. As the patriarch and Jang read through the evidence, their expressions melted into fear and guilt. Lin delivered the truth without hesitation. Shin's father had not died in an accident, he had been murdered. Jang immediately lost control and, in a hysterical outburst, accused Lin of fabricating everything. The grandfather, finally awakening from years of denial, slapped his granddaughter across the face, accepting that his blindness had cost his own son his life. Feeling the walls closing in around her, Jang tried to escape responsibility through a cynical confession. She claimed that the family inheritance had always belonged to them and, in a careless moment, let slip that her uncle had simply been unlucky enough to cross paths with monsters who tore him apart. Lin immediately caught the sinister implication. Jang hadn't acted alone, far more dangerous forces had carried out the killing. Still processing the cruelty of the confession, Shin screamed at her cousin, demanding to know every detail and the identities of the real murderers behind her father's death. A sinister whisper emerged from the shadows. Someone had been watching every move. Lin let out a cold laugh as he looked at the Jian family with contempt. Their image of power was nothing more than a nest of rats hiding within the walls. Without warning, Qing moved. She was so fast that, to everyone present, it looked as though she had simply vanished. The old patriarch begged for mercy, fearing the extinction of his bloodline, but Lin remained calm, interested only in exposing the infestation surrounding them. Seconds later, the sound of a wall being blasted apart echoed from a hidden chamber. Qing emerged, dragging a blue-haired man by the collar. Far from intimidated, the intruder laughed and claimed that the job had already been completed and that nothing there could stop him. A brutal exchange followed, but Qing's superiority was absolute. She subdued him effortlessly and hurled him at Lin's feet in the main hall. Cornered, the man underwent a grotesque transformation. His skin twisted and stretched as two horns burst from his forehead, revealing a mutation typical of the royal bloodline. Shin turned pale and pointed at the creature. It was one of the very monsters that had slaughtered her father. Lin immediately stepped in front of his wife like a shield and left the execution to his subordinate. Qing materialized a dagger made of pure light. The mutant charged forward in a frenzy, his claws engulfed in flames, but he was completely outmatched. In a single precise movement, Qing's blade sliced through his neck. The creature collapsed, choking on its own blood, while Jang watched in total shock, unable to understand how something so horrifying had been defeated so easily. As the enemy lay motionless, Shin noticed an object near the corpse and, with trembling hands, picked it up and handed it to Lin. Lin inspected the item. It was a communication device. Suddenly, Sean's voice echoed through it, mockingly asking how Lin had discovered the surveillance operation. Lin's fury reached its limit. He had spared that man's life once out of mercy, but his patience had run out. The Yan family patriarch turned pale, terrified at the possibility of Lin confronting Cho, whose clan wielded devastating influence. They begged Lin to honor the memory of the old master who had once saved his life. Lin's response was ice cold. He admitted that he had sworn to Master Shang that he would protect the Yan family for 30 years, but that vow had ended the moment they chose to humiliate his wife. The elder attempted to manipulate the situation, arguing that if Shin inherited the family estate, Lin should reconsider his revenge. Jang, in a fit of madness, screamed that the fortune belonged only to her and her father. Completely indifferent to the chaos, Lin gave Shin an ultimatum. It was time to decide. Without hesitation, she rejected any possibility of returning, making it clear how deeply she despised the people who had cast her aside. Respecting her decision, Lin took her hand and led her out of the residence, ignoring the grandfather's desperate cries. The bond was dead. His debt to Master Shang had been repaid, and from that moment forward, Lin would personally deal with the Cho clan. Outside, the Yan elders' frustration and hatred were restrained only by their helplessness in the face of Lin's power. Once they were away, Lin informed Shin that he would need to leave for 2 days to handle urgent matters in the capital, leaving Qing behind as her guardian. Shin expressed guilt over the burden her protection placed on him, but Qing quickly reassured her. Curious about the danger her husband was facing, she asked for the name of the enemy waiting in the capital. Lin answered with a single name, Shen Yan, the most formidable and ruthless figure of the royal bloodline. Though the name meant nothing to her, a chill ran down Shin's spine, as if some instinct deep within her recognized the shadow of an ancient threat. With a farewell kiss, Shin urged Lin to leave quickly. As he walked away, the fate of his enemies was already sealed. Hours later, inside the Chao family mansion, the patriarch of the dynasty simmered with frustration, furious over the lack of information regarding Lin's whereabouts and the slow progress of the investigation into the man who dared challenge his empire. The advisor in the green hat warned that the emperor was losing patience. The Chao family retained its prestige only because of its usefulness, and failure would mean the end of imperial support. The family leader agreed, fully aware that his son's recent injury could be traced back to a single target. The strategy was simple: strike Lin while he was still recovering. Their discussion was abruptly interrupted by a violent crash. Lin stormed into the room, dragging Cheech by the hair, his eyes filled with contempt. The advisor attempted to intimidate the intruder, but Qi's terrified reaction upon recognizing Lin Feng caused Patriarch Chao to burst into laughter. He mocked the protagonist, claiming that Lin had delivered his own head by walking straight into the trap prepared for him. With a strike of his staff, he activated a mechanism that locked Lin beneath a reinforced metal structure. The old patriarch demanded that Lin renounce both the royal bloodline and the Yang family, treating him like a disposable animal. Qi's father tried to intervene when he noticed that his own son had been trapped inside the same mechanism, but he was completely ignored. Lin released Qi and flashed a cold smile, declaring how disgusted he was to be confined alongside vermin and reminding everyone present that his enemies had always paid with their lives. The grandfather's threat was direct. He would not hesitate to sacrifice his own grandson if it meant taking down the protagonist. He activated an electric current through the cage. Qi was struck and immediately began screaming, but the shock had no effect whatsoever on Lin. Smirking, the protagonist mocked the family's blind devotion, suggesting that the emperor probably did not even consider such cheap tricks worth his attention. Lin grabbed the metal bars and tore them apart with pure brute force, leaving the old man stunned. Desperate as his plan collapsed, the patriarch summoned an entire legion of soldiers. The troops opened fire, but the bullets proved completely useless, bouncing off Lin's body as if they were nothing. Lin charged into the platoon, wiping out the gunmen with devastating physical attacks. When a second wave of specialized arrows was launched, he casually caught one of the projectiles in midair. The old man let out a sadistic laugh and explained that they were elite armor-piercing rounds, specifically designed to hunt members of the royal bloodline and now placed at the service of the young emperor. The barrage intensified until the soldiers accidentally struck fuel reserves behind Lin, triggering a massive explosion. Certain that both the mansion and the intruder had been reduced to ashes, the patriarch celebrated his victory. The triumph lasted only seconds. Lin emerged from the flames completely unharmed, moving with supernatural speed. Without hesitation, he delivered a fatal strike and decapitated the old man before he could react. Only Qi's father remained. Overcome by panic, he immediately ordered the deployment of the #1 weapon. Two monstrous abominations stormed into the hall. The surviving patriarch remembered Master Shan's orders: eliminate the Yang family or face death himself. Lin instantly recognized the creatures as mutants who had stolen fragments of the royal bloodline. The battle was entirely one-sided. He smashed the blue-skinned monster into a wall and hurled the red demon across the room as if it weighed nothing. Even with their mutations, the opponents were laughably weak compared to the protagonist's overwhelming power. Lin pulled a firearm from his briefcase, pierced the mutants' defenses with precise shots, and ended the fight by detonating explosives that reduced the area to ashes. As the flames consumed everything around them, Qi's father fled to his office to report the catastrophe. Moments later, the young emperor appeared on the giant screen. When asked about the patriarch's whereabouts, the trembling man struggled to explain the complete failure of the operation and Lin's unstoppable advance. Che's father was effectively doomed, but fear prevented him from telling the Dragon Lord the truth. He attempted to maintain the lie, claiming that the battle was still ongoing, but Shan immediately recognized the deception from the terror written across his subordinate's face. The conversation ended brutally. A hand suddenly pierced through the man's shoulder, followed by a surge of electricity that instantly charred his body. Lin had arrived. At last, Lin and Shan stood face to face. The villain mocked Lin's audacity for attacking the Chao family alone, but but the hero calmly fired back. He explained that while armor-piercing rounds posed a threat to members of the royal bloodline, they were worthless without the proper containment methods. Sean silently cursed the incompetence of his allies. With an ironic grin, Lin smacked the side of his opponent's head and suggested that he would need far more cunning if he hoped to survive. Completely unfazed, Sean declared that the royal family's dominance had already been secured and that Lin remained alive only because of his popularity among the people. The villain justified the slaughter of fellow royals as a necessary sacrifice for power, dismissing Lin's ideals as nothing more than childish naivety. The atmosphere shifted when the sound of a countdown echoed throughout the building. The entire mansion had been rigged with self-destruct explosives. Sean laughed, assuring Lin that he would never leave the trap alive. Seconds later, the explosion swallowed the estate. Far away at home, Shin awoke in a panic, overwhelmed by a terrible premonition. Her attempts to contact her husband failed repeatedly. Distressed, she rushed into another room searching for answers. One of the attendants tried to calm her down, insisting that everything was under control, but eventually gave in to the pressure and suggested using the emergency communication channel to verify the Supreme Commander's condition. Shin hesitated, afraid of interrupting her husband during a critical moment. The attendant reassured her that he was safe, and after forcing herself to calm down, she returned to her room, trusting in her husband's invincibility. The next morning, however, circumstances changed dramatically. Following her episode during the night, Shin was admitted to the hospital. Lin, already present at the medical center, demanded a detailed explanation of his wife's condition. The doctor assured him that she was physically stable but revealed a troubling discovery. Medical tests showed unusual brain activity while she slept, something resembling a short circuit or a psychiatric disturbance. The physician preferred to attribute the phenomenon to recent stress, but promised to investigate it more thoroughly. Outside the hospital, meanwhile, chaos was spreading through the streets as crowds demanded immediate answers from the authorities. Lin watched the unrest through the window until Ching burst into the room. The news was disastrous. The royal family's control over the Northwest had collapsed, and details of the recent battle were spreading across the internet at lightning speed. Public outrage was far from random. Military divisions in the West and North had been crippled after the discovery of deep spy infiltration, resulting in canceled defense contracts and exposing government corruption to the entire nation. The pressure had become global. Online petitions were demanding that the general assume supreme command. Ching waited for instructions, asking how Lin intended to respond to the growing demand. The protagonist quickly understood the situation. The people would accept nothing less than the immediate removal of Vinai's commander, whose ties to the royal family had become impossible to defend. The voice of the people was unanimous. They wanted Lin in command. He weighed the responsibility carefully and, before leaving, entrusted local security to King. His next destination was military headquarters, where Long appeared remarkably relaxed despite the ongoing crisis. After receiving a stern lecture from Lin for his negligence regarding the disaster in the Northwest, the atmosphere shifted. This was not an official summons, it was a personal invitation to the front lines. Long hesitated, arguing that any expedition required official command authorization, but his attitude changed the moment he learned that the scandal had already become public knowledge. With renewed determination, he volunteered to fight alongside his former master for the sake of the nation. Within minutes, a helicopter was waiting on the rooftop. Before takeoff, Lin handed Huang the insignia of the Ijia army, granting him authority over Binhai. The order was clear. Use the emblem only as a last resort against the feared black armor infantry. Huang accepted the responsibility with a confident smile and, before they parted ways, handed Lin a pocket watch containing a photo of Shinna, a reminder of what he was fighting to protect. Lin tucked it away and promised he would return. Long, growing impatient, mocked his companion's sentimentality, claiming that love only distracted warriors, and urged everyone to get moving. As the helicopter's rotors began spinning at full speed, a voice suddenly interrupted the boarding process. A blue-haired man appeared out of nowhere, declaring that no corner of Chinese territory was beyond his reach. The newcomer's presence left everyone stunned. It was Feng, the legendary dragon master, standing right before them and staring directly at the two soldiers. Feng's arrival immediately boosted Lin's morale. He saw it as a strategic turning point in the coming war. The trio took off, leaving Binhai behind as the shadow of conflict loomed ahead. During the flight, Feng explained the origin of his title. The position of Dragon Master existed specifically to ensure that commoners without royal blood could restrain the royal family's hunger for power within the military ranks. Dedicated to his research, Feng had eventually become a target of Shan, who kidnapped and imprisoned him in order to study the forced fusion of royal bloodlines. When Lin asked whether the experiment had succeeded, Feng bitterly admitted that it had. Shan had been using the bodies of nobles to suppress bloodline uprisings, and the researcher had only managed to escape after sabotaging a critical ritual. Lin expressed relief that Feng had survived, and the aircraft continued toward its destination. 80 kilometers from Yinzhou, the pilot issued a warning. Aware of the danger ahead and the lack of reinforcements, Lin offered his allies one final chance to turn back. Neither hesitated. Long and Feng reaffirmed their commitment and jumped. Upon reaching the northwest, the group found a wasteland. Communications had completely collapsed, and local maps were hopelessly outdated. Long attempted to question a civilian for directions, only to have a door slammed in his face, a clear sign of the population's hostility. Lin ignored the setback. After studying the terrain, Long estimated that they still had nearly 20 miles of barren dunes to cross before reaching the fortress. As they mapped out their route, they noticed a child watching them from behind a cluster of rocks. Remaining calm, Lin approached and offered the boy a chocolate bar to gain his trust before directly asking for the precise location of the enemy headquarters. The boy accepted the chocolate and led the trio without hesitation. Along the way, he revealed the grim reality of Jingo. Mercenaries working for the royal family had occupied the city, and fear had silenced its people. The boy's father, devastated by the loss of one of his sons, had withdrawn from the world, just like many of the other local survivors. Eventually, the guide brought them to a hidden refuge and unlocked the entrance using an old key. Inside, they found Chinese fighters in terrible condition, survivors of brutal battles who now lived in constant fear of betrayal. Using the regional dialect to break the tension, Lin lowered their guard and made his intentions clear. He was not there to serve the royal elite. He was there to ensure the survival of their homeland. Meanwhile, the faction known as the Sand Wolves learned about the arrival of reinforcements. Their leader, a man marked by a tattoo on his neck, immediately launched a display of violence. Firing into the air, he demanded the surrender of the soldiers and threatened to burn the entire village to the ground. The same resident who had refused to help Long earlier now hid behind locked doors while the criminals began forcing their way into people's homes. What the bandits failed to notice was the scope of a long-range weapon aimed directly at them. Their numerical advantage was nothing more than an illusion. The first shot rang out, and one of the invaders dropped with a fatal wound. Before the group could react or identify the source of the attack, Lin emerged from the shadows and began eliminating targets with surgical precision, dismantling the Sand Wolves' momentum within seconds. As the invaders terrorized the villagers, Lin launched a silent hunt. By throwing a rock, he deliberately provoked one of the thugs. The man spun around and opened fire wildly, only to be disarmed effortlessly. Upon locking eyes with the Supreme Commander, the invader experienced only a brief moment of understanding before a fatal shot ended his life. A second bandit attempted an ambush but was intercepted mid-motion. When he begged for mercy, Lin coldly questioned whether he had shown any mercy to the unarmed civilians he had terrorized. The criminal's silence sealed his fate. A villager watching through a crack in the door was instructed to stay hidden while Lin reaffirmed that he had come to liberate the region. Soon, additional Sand Wolves units arrived. Lin seized the high ground atop a building before leaping directly into the center of the enemy formation. Gunfire erupted as bodies fell one after another. To those watching from behind their windows, the sight was almost unreal. A single warrior dismantling an entire squad with unmatched skill. The battle ended in a brutal series of hand-to-hand strikes that crushed every remaining trace of resistance. Watching his forces collapse before a single man, the commander cursed his subordinates as worthless failures. The insults died on his lips when he realized they were gone. Terror consumed him as he turned around and found Lin standing silently behind him after killing his personal bodyguard without making a sound. The commander attempted to fight back, but Lin crushed the metal of his weapon with a single grip. Faced with such overwhelming strength, the remaining mercenaries abandoned everything and fled, ignoring their leader's desperate screams. The nightmare continued even as they ran. From a nearby mountain, Lin's group monitored their retreat and eliminated the survivors with precise long-range shots. Cornered, the mercenary leader tried appealing to honor, calling Lin a coward for relying on firearms. Lin responded with a cold stare and questioned the morality of a gang that terrorized defenseless civilians in pursuit of territory. The villain merely smiled and revealed that he possessed critical information regarding the enemy headquarters. Then, removing the cap from his head, the commander's true identity was revealed. The commander was a woman. Long arrived, escalating the tension as he confirmed the complete extermination of the fugitives in Yinzhou City. The moment the woman noticed Feng, the Dragon Master, and Long, She let out a sarcastic laugh, dismissing them as nothing more than puppets. Furious at the insult, Long aimed his weapon at her and demanded respect. She tried to force a negotiation, making the location of the base conditional on her own freedom. Lin showed no interest in striking deals with someone whose loyalty was so questionable and cut the conversation short. Growing impatient with her arrogance, he grabbed her and ended the games. Lin lifted the mercenary by the throat, applying enough pressure to crush any resistance. With no way out, she gave in and revealed the location of the Eaglehead Fortress. Once released, she collapsed to the ground and muttered a warning about the unexpected return of Lin's power, clearly terrified by the brutality she had just witnessed. The group immediately split up. Long took responsibility for guarding the prisoner, while Feng was assigned to establish a defensive base at Eagle Point. Making use of the existing structures, Feng delegated the organization of the local survivors to the wounded commander. The march through the desert continued with the prisoner in handcuffs and under constant watch. She explained the Sand Wolves' patrol patterns, warning them about the rapid troop rotations, but Lin, focused entirely on the objective, interrupted her and demanded a timeline to the enemy base. Her vague answer, pointing toward distant dunes, immediately raised suspicion. Feng checked the map and exposed the lie. She had been leading them in the opposite direction, straight into the empty desert. Long chambered around, making it clear that his patience had run out. She quickly defended herself, claiming she was only trying to stop them from committing suicide against an army of 10,000 men. Before the situation could be resolved, a yellow vehicle came speeding across the dunes, kicking up clouds of dust and blocking their path. The woman immediately recognized the newcomers as the Vultures, the most ruthless squad in the region, infamous for exterminating any Chinese fighters they encountered. Their bald leader stepped out of the vehicle and announced that he would be taking the mercenary, while the fate of everyone else would be decided by force. Lin didn't wait. He snatched Long's dagger and, in a fraction of a second, cut through the enemy front line. The elite squad was wiped out before they could even draw their weapons. The mercenary watched in absolute shock, frozen by the speed of the slatter. Completely indifferent to her fear, Lin simply returned the knife to its owner and ordered everyone to keep moving. Lin gave the prisoner one final choice: the truth or death. Under pressure, she revealed that Eaglehead Castle was a self-sufficient fortress equipped with motion sensors, field radar systems, and constant surveillance. The greatest danger was immediate detection by the Sand Wolves, but Feng dismissed her concerns by revealing that he had already infiltrated the system, blocked the signals, and taken control of the video feeds. The trio commandeered one of the enemy vehicles and sped toward the base. Along the way, a sniper positioned among the dunes noticed that the Allied vehicle had a different driver and hesitated for a split second. That hesitation cost him everything. Lin gave the order to attack, and Long climbed onto the roof of the car, clearing the dune ridges with pinpoint shots. Guards were either blown away by the impacts or crushed beneath the vehicle's unstoppable advance. The prisoner panicked and warned that they would become easy targets, but Lin ignored her suggestion to stay hidden. He had no intention of sneaking in. The vehicle roared over the sentries trying to block the road, leaving them broken behind. As the garrison attempted to activate intrusion alarms, Long planted bullets into nearby fuel tanks, turning the entrance into an inferno. Amid the chaos, the woman shouted a critical warning. The castle was packed with Chinese hostages, and Long's uncontrolled firepower was putting all of their lives in immediate danger. Ignoring the mercenaries' panic, Lin remained focused on Feng's interface and demanded the exact countdown for the collapse of the enemy defenses. The Dragon Master confirmed that access was nearly complete, but time ran out when an armed reconnaissance aircraft appeared overhead and locked onto the vehicle. As the aircraft dove toward them, Lin leaped from the moving car and left the controls to Long. Moving at superhuman speed, the protagonist reached the aircraft's cockpit in midair. He ripped the Vulcan cannon off the fuselage with his bare hands and hurled it away, triggering an explosion that lit up the horizon. Long laughed at his master's audacity as the vehicle continued forward, and moments later Lin landed back near the car and ordered them to keep moving. At the gates of Eaglehead Castle, the garrison prepared for a final stand, but their defenses proved worthless. A devastating energy blast unleashed by Lin reduced the main entrance to rubble. His eyes glowed crimson as he activated his supreme bloodline. The vehicle smashed through the gates, mowing down entire enemy ranks. The gravitational pressure radiating from Lin became so intense that the ground itself began to crack and sections of the castle started collapsing. From his command post, the fortress leader watched the chaos unfold with a sadistic smile, fascinated by the intruder. A battle tank rolled forward and aimed its cannon directly at Lin. The shell was fired, but Lin casually redirected the impact and sent the explosive round back into the enemy's own forces. Enraged by the humiliation, Commander Ding attempted to crush him beneath the tank's massive weight. Lin stood his ground. He stopped the vehicle with his bare hands and unleashed a high-voltage electric surge through the metal frame, twisting the armored hull. Still confident, Ding fired another shell point blank, only to watch Lin catch the explosive projectile in the palm of his hand and hold it motionless. The bomb detonated, but the blast dispersed before it could even touch Lin. He stared directly at Ding, calling him a rat before forcing his way into the citadel. Deep inside the structure, he discovered the prison compound. A woman shielding her child asked if he was the hope sent by the Chinese government. Lin confirmed it and ordered an immediate evacuation. Outside, chaos ruled the battlefield as Long carved a path through enemy lines, jumping from the vehicle and dragging the mercenary with him through the crossfire. A cry cut through the sound of gunfire. Sister Jibin, one of the newly freed prisoners, ran toward the mercenary and hugged her tightly, revealing that everyone had believed she was dead. The boy immediately glared at Long when he noticed her hands were bound. When Long explained that she was a dangerous assassin, the boy quickly pushed back, insisting that Jibin was the very person who had prevented the hostages from being slaughtered. Other survivors backed up the story, explaining that after being captured while crossing the border, Jibin had been the only one protecting them. Faced with the evidence, Lin ordered the agent's restraints removed. She introduced herself as an infiltrator embedded within the Sand Wolves, whose mission was to pass critical intelligence to the Chinese military. Jibin explained the civil war raging between the three dominant factions, the Wolves, the Snakes, and the Bears, and recommended an immediate withdrawal, knowing the conflict was impossible to sustain. Lin, however, laughed at the suggestion of retreat. With unwavering determination, he ordered Long to escort the civilians to safety while he stayed behind to reclaim the territory. Driven by the same sense of patriotism, Jibin refused to leave. She argued that reclaiming territory controlled by the Snakes would be impossible without a local guide. Determined to continue alone, Lin found his resolve challenged by the agent's persistence, as she proved that nobody knew the secrets of that land better than she did. Lin tried to insist that they should part ways, but the combined persistence of Long and Jibin eventually wore him down. He gave in and focused on organizing the supplies necessary to get everyone to safety together. As he prepared for the journey, his thoughts inevitably drifted to Shin, and he silently prayed for her protection. The story shifted to Axon's residence. Shin, exhausted and running on no sleep since the previous day, ignored her subordinate's repeated requests to rest. The assistant even tried invoking Lin's name, arguing that he would never approve of her pushing herself this hard, but Shin remained firm. In her mind, serving her country came first. Her research had uncovered that a former business partner had broken ties with the Yan family to establish a massive rival corporation against the Mei family. On the surface, it seemed like ordinary corporate news, but Shin knew it was the spark that could throw Binhai into complete chaos. Her eyes eventually settled on a framed photograph. Lin and Rui were all that truly mattered to her. Moved by the sight, her subordinate silently vowed to keep the city stable no matter the cost. As night fell, Lin made camp. Sitting beside the fire, he opened the pocket watch and stared at the photograph of his wife inside. It was a reminder of the promise he intended to keep, that he would return. The next morning, the hostages, now supplied and safe, departed for Eagle City after offering heartfelt thanks to the protagonist. The trio continued their journey until they reached the most dangerous region in the northwest, a land completely ravaged by war. Jibin warned them that moving forward was the only viable route, but as they attempted to continue, they encountered something unexpected. Feng and Jibin studied the map with pale faces. They had entered a lawless zone. Jibin explained that within this specific territory, energy-based powers and supernatural abilities were completely nullified. The proof came instantly. While airborne, Lin suddenly froze and lost his ability to fly. He plummeted toward the ground. Long shouted in confusion, trying to understand what had happened, but Jibin delivered a grim warning. Lin's fall was only the beginning of a nightmare where brute strength alone would not be enough to keep them alive. The silence of an afternoon by the pool was shattered by a violent impact. A glass ceiling collapsed, and Lin crashed into the water below, stunned and cut off from his supernatural abilities. His subordinate appeared moments later, but the shock of no longer sensing Lin's overwhelming aura left everyone unsettled. The moment of weakness didn't last long. An unfamiliar soldier pressed a gun against Lin's temple, while a young woman swimming nearby recognized the Supreme Leader's face and watched the scene with a mixture of curiosity and desire. One punch reduced the firearm to a twisted pile of scrap metal. Even without his powers, Lin's combat skills remained deadly. The group's brute force fighter, realizing he couldn't restrain the protagonist, suggested cowardly tactics such as blindfolding and chaining him up. The idea was immediately shut down by the young woman, who saw an entirely different opportunity. Instead of fighting the supreme commander of the South, they should be securing his protection. A curtain of smoke suddenly filled the room as the woman asked for help getting dressed. Ignoring all protocol, Lin pushed straight through the haze, ready for battle. The soldier attempted to stall, arguing that attacking a lady while she was changing would be dishonorable. Once she finished, she emerged with a completely different proposal. She intended to kidnap him. According to her, Lin would have no choice but to follow. Lin didn't hesitate. His objective was the eradication of the desert sand wolves, which placed her squarely on the target list as well. She merely smiled with absolute confidence. There was something she possessed, she claimed, something of immeasurable value that Lin desperately wanted. Before long, she promised, he would be begging for a deal. Lin's suspicion was obvious. Every word sounded like blackmail or some elaborate trap tied to his identity. This time, however, she decided to be honest. The planet's magnetic field directly interfered with his abilities. Without his powers, he had become an easy target. According to her, the solution lay within an ancient seal buried deep inside the Earth's core. Breaking that seal would restore his full strength. There was only one problem. She was the only person who knew how to reach it, and she demanded complete trust in exchange for her cooperation. Before Lin could respond, the tension escalated when an armed man arrived demanding answers about the earlier gunfire. The newcomer identified himself as an ally and confirmed that they had captured one of the Desert Wolf tribe's soldiers. More enemies were already moving toward them, drawn by the noise. Lin immediately ordered an evacuation. The woman maintained her provocative attitude and continued pushing for a strategic alliance, arguing that they shared common goals. The armed man, visibly distracted by her seductive presence, struggled to process the situation. Switching effortlessly between charm and cold professionalism, she drew a weapon from behind her back and reminded everyone that distractions were a luxury they could not afford. For Lin, the lesson was obvious. She was every bit as dangerous as the steel she carried. As the group moved outside, the threat finally materialized in the form of heavily armed riflemen. The woman ordered her allies to take their positions, and suddenly the area became flooded, forcing the attackers to change tactics. When the invaders finally pushed into the facility, they were greeted by two impeccably dressed women with magnetic charm and flawless composure. The atmosphere changed instantly. The attackers lowered their guard, completely captivated by the women's beauty. With carefully calculated smiles, the two women invited the intruders to join them. The moment they got close, the white-haired girl submerged and pulled her partner underwater. The atmosphere, once filled with laughter, was overtaken by the crack of hidden gunfire. The men who had been seeking satisfaction only seconds earlier dropped dead before they could even touch their targets. Beneath the water, the women remained unharmed, surfacing only after the danger had passed. Vinci emerged from the water and questioned her partner's identity. The answer came without hesitation. She was Julie, commander of the Ancient Serpents. Distrust immediately filled the air, with Vinci doubting the true power of someone claiming to be the leader. Lin appeared among them, cutting through the tension and declaring that preparations for the next phase were complete. While members of the team celebrated the victory with excessive praise and flattery directed at their instructor, Lin remained unfazed, focusing only on the hidden motives behind the alliance with the serpents. The story shifted to a corporate setting. A woman expressed deep gratitude to her mentor. Without him, her downfall would have been inevitable. He, in turn, remained pragmatic and handed her a confidential list containing the names of members of Binhai's political and business coalition. As she flipped through the documents, the blonde woman noticed an overwhelming concentration of figures from rising power groups. The man explained the gap. She lacked the influence necessary to move freely among the elite circles of power and the private sector. She admitted her dependence, recognizing that her rise to the position of president had only been possible thanks to the strategic support of allies, especially the Wang family. After a brief moment of reflection, she accepted the proposed plan and sealed the agreement. Her faction would also join the power bloc. The mentor showed surprise at the young woman's courage. She revealed that the distorted magnetic field functioned like a sponge, draining the life energy of bloodlines, which was the primary target of Shenyan's rituals. Visibly uncomfortable with the revelation, the man mentioned the discovery of a traitor within the army who had been investigating the meteorite, but quickly replaced his concern with greed, praising the immeasurable value of the space rock. Following her strategy, the laboratory would serve merely as a front to attract capital. She ordered the creation of an elite task force and the immediate expansion of operations once the situation in the northwest was brought under control. After reaching an agreement, the conversation shifted to other topics. Praise was showered upon Mrs. Yang, who smiled while lost in thought. She reflected on the saying that the husband protects the outside world while the wife builds the empire within, wondering whether she was truly worthy of that responsibility. As night fell, the banquet hall in Binhai was alive with energy. The host called for silence to announce the arrival of Yang Shihui. She appeared in a stunning dress that immediately captured the attention of every guest. Taking the microphone, she thanked everyone for their continued support of her group, officially beginning the celebration. As the elite raised their glasses, a figure in a white cloak watched from the shadows, silently swearing to protect those people no matter the cost. Meanwhile, the protagonist's reality was very different, marked by ruins and dust. The braided-haired boy received treatment for an injury. His companion sarcastically mocked his weakness, contrasting his rugged appearance with his childish complaints about being cut by poisonous grass while clearing the area. The impatience of the other ally was obvious. She couldn't believe such a simple task had resulted in such an unnecessary injury. The complaints about the poisoning sounded ridiculous, but the wounded boy barely cared, lost in contemplation of the landscape. The white mist covering the area began to thin and slowly dissipate. The tension between the two women became obvious when one demanded to know the location of the exit. The response came in the form of a cold taunt. She would have to figure it out herself. Lin watched the petty argument in complete silence. Frustrated, the white-haired leader ordered her subordinates to attack the rival. The soldier hesitated, unable to bring himself to harm someone with such flawless looks. The leader exploded in anger, furious that her men's loyalty was wavering over something as superficial as appearance. Meanwhile, the target of the order simply laughed, finding it pathetic that the woman was trying to command a bunch of useless followers. The pink-haired young man stepped forward, questioning the reason for the laughter, and the two quickly exchanged insults. The white-haired woman mocked his looks and lack of character, while he lazily defended himself with cynical remarks, even bragging about his own humility. Lin had finally reached his limit. He imposed order with an authority that silenced everyone, demanding complete focus on the objective and forbidding them from wasting time on trivial matters. The protagonist's commanding presence impressed his ally, who immediately asked what his next move would be. The companions around them simply confirmed the obvious. Supreme Lin was ruthless, leaving no room for mercy or hesitation. In the background, the mercenary watched everything with contempt, labeling the complexity and irrationality of humans as unbearable. Ignoring nature's subtle warnings, such as the flight of a bird overhead, the team continued forward. Their destination was the domain of the ancient serpent. The moment they noticed the bird circling above their route, the pink-haired boy tensely gripped his weapon, the feeling that something dangerous awaited them growing stronger with every step.